Douglas, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
I'm a Christian Bible teacher who travels around the world, who has an interest in evidences. I love theology, history, science, and talking with people with different viewpoints. So I was very happy when your assistant reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in having this time with you. So I thank you.
Awesome. So the topic today was reasons to believe in Christianity and in God and Christianity. Could you tell me your position on that?
I can. I didn't know that was a topic, but that's fine. Yeah, my position is that there is a God. Christianity is best defined by Jesus more than its modern iterations in various church groups and cults. So I'm a Christian and I'm a theist.
Cool. So I'm an atheist, by which I mean I believe that all the evidence seems to indicate naturalism, that everything is physical and material, and I tend to go with the consensus of science in those regards. So could you tell me what reasons you believe there are for belief in anything beyond the realm of science?
Well, maybe it's good to mention that there are a lot of scientists who have faith.
Oh, sure, but none
It
of
might
the
be half of all scientists believe in God in some way, and certainly a large number don't believe in God. But I would
well, sure,
make
but their
this,
personal beliefs aren't really what matters. What matters is what does the papers and the evidence actually indicate is there. And so there's lots of scientists who have lots of silly beliefs beyond just their research, but I'm
well,
interested in what the
unfortunately, that's
research
true.
indicates.
But science can only study the physical world. Scientism, the idea that only the physical world exists, there can be nothing that transcends it, is a metaphysical position, not a position that can be proved by science. I mean, I don't use scales to measure rainfall or radioactivity. Scales measure weight. Science measures what it measures, and science is wonderful, but it can't tell us anything directly about God or the spiritual world. Wouldn't you say?
No, I would say that if it existed, science could test it. So, for example, like, say I believe there was a spiritual entity named Bob, and I wanted to show evidence of Bob. I could say, if Bob exists, he will be able to pick up this cup, and if you ask him to, so people go down to my basement and ask Bob to pick up the cup, and the cup rises off the ground. That would be great evidence of Bob, and that's scientifically testable. I don't need to directly measure Bob to see the indirect results of Bob. So if a
Oh,
spiritual
but
or
I'm
non
not saying we indirectly, and I'm not saying we can indirectly measure God. Measure God. I almost
oh
said
no,
God.
this was about the science claim. Can science test for non-physical claims? The answer is yes. If there is a non-physical entity and you made predictions that can be observed based off of this non-physical entity, and they happen, that would be evidence of the non-physical
But
by using science.
we'd be outside the realm of science in that case.
No, science is just observing testable predictions. So science doesn't have any problem with non-physical things. In fact, there's an entire journal called the Journal of Parapsychology, which is an academic journal of peer-reviewed things, researching psychic stuff, which is also non-physical. And so science doesn't care at all about the non-physical. That's the thing Christians and religious people normally accuse science of, but science is nothing, has nothing to do with science whatsoever. Science is perfectly happy to test the supernatural. What science doesn't do is accommodate things that have no evidence. So that's what science eliminates. If it has no
Right. Things
evidence,
that
we're not allowed to talk about it.
no, but I have to push back on the idea that science can measure anything,
Anything that
physical or
has
non-physical.
anything that can make testable predictions that are observable.
Right. Science is limited to the physical world, to what is empirically verifiable, to what can be measured. And science is great there. But if we're talking about other things that exist, love, logic, numbers, and so forth, science has to make a leap of faith or it can't say anything at all.
I'm not sure what you mean. Like, because like in my example, Bob is non-physical. But if Bob did something that can be seen in the physical world, we could then have evidence of Bob. So science is happy to talk about the non-physical. There are tons of academic papers of non-physical things of parapsychology. So science is not limited to the physical. No one in science says science is limited to
Parapsychology,
the
like
physical.
Ghostbusters. My
Sort of.
first university was Duke, which used to have a parapsychology department, but eventually it was shut down, and rightly so, because a lot of the stuff is silly. So,
Sure, but that's not the point. The point is that science does not limit itself to the physical. No one in science says that. That's the thing Christians say. So science is perfectly happy to investigate the supernatural. Not a problem whatsoever. The problem
but as long as instruments could measure,
well, right,
we're
that's the
talking
testable.
about energy, we're talking about mass, we're talking about the real world, and I'm calling that the physical world. You can call it something else if you want to, but science measures what science measures.
Right. We have to have whatever your hypothesis is has to have an effect on something we can see. Otherwise, there's no evidence for it. And so you have to have an indirect observation such that, like, if the ghost exists and we can't measure the ghost, but we can see what the ghost does in the world, that would still be
Mhm.
evidence of the ghost. And so science can, if you can see the consequences of a hypothesis, you say, I think this is caused by a non-physical entity. And if it is, I predict this non-physical entity will cause this other event that we don't expect. And we test for it and we see the other event. That is evidence of a non-physical thing that was tested and supported by science. So science does not in any way limit to the physical. It's not a thing in science. Nobody in science says that. That's a Christian thing. And so if you could, in fact, prove God with science, if you made novel testable predictions, you say, if God exists, there's I think it's Ephesians something, something, where God says if you put a cloth into water and pray to God, he will burst it into flames. That would be a great test. That would be evidence of God. Or if you could pray to God and he would cure amputees' limbs, that would be phenomenal evidence of God. And these are scientifically testable things. And so it seems like a very strange criticism of science that we can't test the supernatural, because that's just not a position science holds.
Most scientists I've met have agreed that that's outside the realm of science completely. I'm not sure what passage you were thinking of. In you said Ephesians, a cloth burst into flame.
Yeah, it's one that Pine Creek always uses. So he has another YouTuber like me. He brings it up all the
Oh, I
time.
see. If you know, as an example, if God would play those kinds of games. So you don't believe in any miracles, or do you?
No, no.
Yeah, and I don't believe in any miracles except a few. I mean,
Okay.
I'm a skeptic, and maybe clearly not as skeptical as you are, but there is evidence for miracles. That I didn't think we would talk about that today, but Craig Keener, who's a New Testament scholar of incredible integrity, produced a 2-volume series, very carefully researched. I don't rest on that. That's not the main reason I believe in God, but sure, there are miracles.
So I've read those. Those are very interesting books, and there's several scientists who have gone through like the top 10 examples of the best miracles in the book, and they're all pretty terrible. So like one of them is the one with the red shoe, where a person who was in a coma, I believe, had heard of a red shoe in a particular room in the building in the other ward across the valley or whatever, the big parking lot, and there was a red shoe there. This was confirmed, so there's some testimony this actually
That's not
happened in
very
some dreams.
impressive, is it, Tom?
No, well, because it's fully explained naturally. That would be the
Some
crux
things
of the
can be
issue.
explained naturally. Some things are on the borderline, and other things. But you asked me a question of why I believe.
Okay.
I
Well, I
would
do
begin.
want to just talk about Craig Keener, because you did bring him up a little bit. So Craig Keener's, all of his best examples can be fully explained naturally. The two that I really like to talk about are the red shoe. The red shoe can be fully explained by cognition happening when you're not conscious. So when you lose consciousness suddenly, your brain, all of the pathways in your brain are kind of like pipes, and they're left open in the way that they
Sure,
were configured prior to losing consciousness. And so any of
sure.
the sensations you have, touch, sound, taste, etc., still cause vibrations, and those cells still have ATP, which then release. And so the cells fire as they would normally, just only once or twice or something, which then gets sent to the brain, which then records this sensation as if it was a conscious memory. So when you wake up, you will have a memory of experiencing something as if it was something you experienced as when you were awake, when it was not the case. And many of those things can be transmissible
That's fine.
through, like, if what's happening on when you're being having surgery done on you, those are
Yeah,
sensations that can be saved in your memory that
I
you
accept what you're
remember.
saying,
Well, the same
but
thing as with the red shoe.
there
And
are
this,
thousands of examples. You picked a couple that aren't so convincing.
well, no, these were
Um,
like the best examples. These are the ones that have the most evidence of all of his book. Like that was the claim, is that we wanted to find the
well,
best
it was
ones.
two books, not one. But,
Yes. Yes.
okay. Uh, I asked about miracles. I said, you don't believe in miracles, do you?
Right.
I understand that. But for many people, miracles they've experienced or the rationality of the possibility of Jesus being raised from the dead counts pretty heavily and suggests that there's a God. But I was going to begin with speaking of morality, though I'm happy to talk about science if you prefer. But
Either is fine with me. I just don't. I would not label science as saying it's outside of the realm of the physical. I think that's an inaccurate portrayal of science.
So you think science can measure something apart from before, although that's the wrong preposition, the singularity?
That would still be physical. I mean, there are physical theories about what is before the singularity, and there's good evidence to support those. So, yes, but I mean, that would still be physical. Like before the singularity is still physical quantum fields. But even if there was like another realm of non-physical things, science could still test for that. If it had any effect in the world whatsoever,
Now,
science could test
are
for
you
that.
trying to say that Big Bang Theory suggests there are quantum fields and these exist before the explosion?
Yes, that is the consensus of science. Yeah.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I'm extremely sure about that. Space and time are the current consensus is called emergent space-time. Space and time emerge from
Space and
something
time
more
emerge,
fundamental.
matter and energy, all at one time. But the notion that it comes from a quantum field, or let's not talk about quantum foam. This is really speculative stuff. I mean, I think I read a lot of the same books you do. But the big question is, why is there anything instead of nothing? You'd agree that's a scientific question, yes? Why does anything exist as opposed to nothing existing? I'm not hearing you. Maybe you're frozen. I'm sure not at a loss for words, but I hear nothing right now, Tom. Okay, well, I can talk even if I can't hear you. Right. So we could talk about the Kalam cosmological argument. Love to talk about that. Are you back, Tom? Are you going in and out?
That was
Okay, I see you again. I hear you again.
Yeah, I lost connection for some reason. I don't know why. I think something's going on today. All right, that's
And
where
we don't attribute it to the miraculous just because we don't know exactly what it is.
I feel like it's more likely the electrical company because they said they were going to do something with the electrical box. That's more. I think that's a more plausible explanation. But yes, so
Well, these things happen.
yeah. So what were you saying before?
Well, I'm not sure you heard me. I was mentioning the Kalam cosmological argument,
Oh yes,
but I was also saying
so
we
quantum
could
foam. I
talk
wanted
about
to.
morality.
Well, so you mentioned quantum foam, and I wanted to say that yes, quantum foam is speculative, but it's still better than a god
Why?
because all of the parts, the combinations of all theories in physics are of things that have been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination. And any hypothesis that isn't only a combination of things that have been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination are better than any theory that adds even a single property that has not yet been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination.
What, on
So,
the principle of Occam's razor or something like that?
no, just evidence. So, like if I see a hoof print in the snow and I say a horse did it, that's going to be a more logical explanation than if I said a unicorn did it, because there's no evidence of unicorns. Like that's if there's no evidence of the thing
Yes,
existing.
I've heard you speaking about unicorns before. You like
Right.
those. And
Well, so the string theory, for example, or the multi-world, many worlds hypothesis is a combination of two things.
is that
One
something that
is
you support, the idea of many worlds or multiverse?
No, I'm just giving an example because it's the
Okay.
easiest to use. So I like quantum fields. Quantum fields are my theory. I don't particularly like string theory or many worlds, but many worlds, to use the most ridiculous example I can, is better than a god because it's a combination of two things which we know for a fact exist and have been demonstrated to exist, which one is early universe inflation, which was demonstrated in observations in the cosmic microwave background, and the other is virtual particles, which are demonstrated in the empirical
Okay.
experiment of the Casimir
No
effect.
argument about that. I mean, you're certainly right about that. But trying to account for the origin of one universe seems to be a lot very different than accounting for the origin of infinite universes or
Well,
multiverse. Because I
well,
often meet atheists who say, well, yes, it's unlikely, it is suspiciously fine-tuned, the anthropic principle and so forth, but given infinite universes and infinite time, neither of which seem to be real, we push back the problem and we multiply it. We make it a lot worse. Much better to suggest one cause for the universe than and being a god. I think that makes a lot more sense than dragging in the multiverse or string theory or M theory. Although
Well,
there are
so
attractive aspects.
a few things there. One, the fine tuning is better explained by string theory than God, but the point here is that a theory that only uses combinations of verified things is better than any theory that adds new things with no evidence. That's the only important part here. The other entailments of the theory are secondary. So you were essentially bringing up the Occam's razor thing about, well, maybe there's other problems, maybe there's other things that it can solve. That part doesn't matter here. The only thing that I'm illustrating is that any theory that's only a combination of verified principles is always better than one that adds new stuff that hasn't been verified. So non-physical mind, omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, those things, none of those have any basis in physics. There's no like physics equation to represent any of those, no
Of course, it's
particle.
a different realm. It's a different
Right.
domain,
Right.
different
So those
magisterium.
those have not been verified to exist. That's like saying magic or leprechauns or fairies. None of those
Yeah,
have any
and I
evidence.
live quite close to Ireland, but I don't believe in leprechauns. I don't know
Right.
if they come here to Scotland or not.
Right. And so in physics, saying that a non-physical mind did something is equivalent to saying a leprechaun did something, because you're taking a new property that has not
But
yet been demonstrated to exist and putting it into the theory where there's no.
that's not something a Christian scientist would say, at least not one
Um,
who wasn't overstating. But we're
right.
saying if the universe if comes from nothing, nothing becomes something. That requires a cause. Whatever comes into being requires a cause.
Right.
You'd
And to
agree
say
with
that was
that,
a
right?
sure. Yeah. I don't, no one believes something came from nothing. That's not a thing in physics. But
But did the
again,
universe come into being?
come into being. Our universe did. Yes.
Right. So if this is the beginning of space-time, matter, energy, it needs a cause.
Sure. We agree.
And to say that that suggests something that itself is timeless, not space-bound, something that's somehow qualitatively different, infinite. It's not like that's a big leap. I mean, I admit it wouldn't tell you that it's the Christian God, or even tell you that it's only one God. But I don't think it's unreasonable to conclude that there is some infinite force, some infinite mind behind this thing.
Well, the mind part is the part I'm objecting to here. So I didn't say anything about the Christian God specifically. To say that there is a non-physical mind, there is zero evidence of that. No one,
Of
consensus
course,
in
because
neurology, cognitive science.
we're not talking about a physical thing.
Well, again,
And I
science
will
covers
keep coming
everything.
back to that.
So I just want to clarify: science is the method that we use to differentiate imagination from reality in all contexts. That's it. There's no physical limitation here. It's just anything that can differentiate imagination from reality. That's science. And so, if you don't have a way to demonstrate the difference between imagination and reality, you have no evidence. And so, when we're talking about a non-physical mind that created the universe in physics, that is equivalent to saying a leprechaun created the universe. There's
But
no evidence.
we're not saying that in physics. I'm saying that Big Bang Theory suggests there's a God. I'm not talking about a proof. I'm not talking about a
No.
scientific
So again, it
statement.
suggests nothing of the kind. It's like nothing of the kind. What it suggests is that we don't know what caused the Big Bang. That's the question. And so, of the possible solutions, the possible hypothesis that can explain what caused the Big Bang, the only ones that are rational are ones that are combinations of principles, particles, and laws that can be demonstrated to exist independent of our
Yeah.
imagination. If you add in any one that does not, then you are saying leprechauns, unicorns, magic. Those are all the level of the theory at that point, which is why physics and
I
science
know.
is not allowed to do that, because it can't differentiate imagination from reality when you add in properties that haven't been demonstrated to not be imaginary. And so
Okay. And
this is why I
I'm
just
not
want to
arguing
draw.
with you on that.
Well, this is why I just want to draw back to why is the quantum foam, the singularity, string theory, many worlds. Why is this better than a God? Because all of those are combinations of principles and particles and laws that have been demonstrated to exist independent of imagination. And any theory that adds even one that has not is inherently a worse theory, and God adds many.
It sounds like that's a creed you have.
It's
I mean,
evidence.
I could say we're in a world where there's personality, where there's intelligence, where
Sure.
there's information, where there's design.
Sure.
Combining those observations and just being commonsensical certainly doesn't rule out the possibility that there's a God. And that would be that's preferable to put those considerations together than to add in something that is unimpressive and unnecessary, which might actually be something from science. The salinity of the oceans has very little to do with this discussion about a world where there's information, intelligence, design, personality, morality. So, I mean, I think we could
Sure.
flip what you're saying, and we could talk about non-physical, or let's say non-scientific things. But science does not describe all of reality. You seem to be saying it is. Can we talk
Yeah,
about
I think it
morality?
does. Well, sure,
Sorry?
sure. Just yes, absolutely, we can go to morality. But I do want to comment on what you just said. Like, I agree, minds and intentionality and design exist, like pineapples and desalination of the ocean and rocks exist. But to say that mind existed outside of space and time and created our universe would be like to say a pineapple existed outside of space time and created our universe. All evidence of pineapples is they are physical things that exist in the world, that exist in space time. There are no examples of these outside of space time. There's no reason to think they could exist outside of space time. And so to say a mind or a pineapple existed prior to the universe is, I would say, nonsensical. But to say a quantum field, which has lots and lots of evidence it can exist outside of space-time, that's plausible. That's a thing that we've demonstrated can exist and can exist outside of space-time. And we have good evidence of these things. We have no evidence minds or pineapples can. And so it seems like in the hierarchy of existing things that we've demonstrated to exist, which is like quantum fields, physics, chemistry, biology, and then brains and intentionality, and then intentionality, to
To
say that
measure,
things
yeah,
what? Well, to say
to
that those
measure
things, the
certain.
intentionality things, are at the beginning of the universe is equally as rational as to say a pineapple exists at the
So you don't
beginning of the
believe in
universe.
SpongeBob at the bottom of the sea
No, I do not. I
living in a
wish I did.
pineapple? Okay. We can come back to this if you like, but uh,
Sure,
why don't we talk about morality a little bit?
sure.
Okay, wait, so you asked me first. I didn't even know what the topic was. What do I believe in God? And I think you said, why do you believe in Christianity? Those are, I
Either is
suppose,
fine with me. You can go in any direction you want. Feel
and I
free.
mentioned the Kalam cosmological argument. We could talk about the appearance of fine tuning. We could say we got lucky, just happened to live in this universe. And we can talk about quantum fields, but when we start making quantum observations, we're connecting them with something that is temporal. So
Sure.
I'm not sure even what that means, that quantum fields exist out of space time.
Well, just to go back, remember when I said that science can test non-physical things because all it needs to do is see the consequences of those things. So even if I can say there is this non-temporal thing, and if there is this non-temporal thing, I would expect that under these conditions, we'll see this result in a lab. Even if the effect is in a lab, if it's something that we haven't expected before and that's a novel prediction based on this theory of non-temporal things, and we see it, that is evidence of non-temporal things. It's called indirect observation. We don't need to directly
Well,
observe.
maybe we shouldn't use the word physical. We can, if you prefer the adjective empirical, maybe that works better. But I think most people sense the difference, the qualitative difference between science and what it measures, and other things that are equally real, like justice, love.
I
I
think
mean,
science measures loves, but yeah.
you think science could measure love or justice? I mean, there are
Love, I don't think
there are,
justice is a real thing, but love, yes. Love is absolutely something we can measure. We can control it in the brain. We can turn it off and on by zapping you in the correct spot.
okay, so that's the brain side, the neurochemical side.
What I think that is all there is. I think that
Well,
love
that's
is
all that science could. That's all that science could measure.
well, that's
But that
the only thing that has evidence. Yeah.
it's the only thing that has scientific evidence.
Is there another
Uh,
kind?
Sure, the forensic evidence doesn't have to be scientific.
Yes, it does. I'm not sure what you
Experiential
mean.
evidence doesn't have to be scientific. Not just
Yeah.
lacking an explanation.
I think both of those do have to be scientific. I'm not sure what you mean. Like if we went to a
Maybe
court
you're
case,
using scientific in a different way than I am. You're talking about empirical verification and instruments and laboratories and testable hypotheses. And I'm saying that science goes a long way, and it's wonderful, but it doesn't tell us how to live our lives.
sure.
I'm trying to move
It
into
does.
discussing morality. Tom, do you believe that the universe has a moral dimension, or are you more of
Yes.
a Nietzschean, would you say? Okay.
I'm a moral realist, like most philosophers who are also mostly atheists.
Yeah. Why would anything be absolutely right or wrong if there's no God? There's
Well,
no
there's
moral reference point outside by which to make measurements of what's right or wrong.
you don't need a
Why
God
is
for a
Nietzsche
moral
not
measure.
correct?
Well, you don't need a God for a moral measurement. This is another assumption that many theists make, that God is the only thing that can act as a moral grounds. Well, that's just false. Like literally, the earliest moral things, the models of morality, like Plato's Platonic forms. Like that's a moral ground that isn't a god. Karma is a moral ground that isn't a god. It's just a field. There could be lots of different moral grounds. A priori abstracts is a moral grounds that isn't a field. There you can have all kinds of theories of objective morality, which are all better than a god. They work significantly better than a god
All right,
and
well,
explain the data.
Plato spoke of hotheos. I don't believe he said that is a form. Karma is karma is something in Hinduism which is ultimately impersonal.
Yeah.
And in Buddhism, developing out of Hinduism, classical Buddhism, there is no such thing as right and wrong, because all distinctions are false, all categories are empty. So I don't think those examples work.
So I didn't mention Buddhism, but so objective morality
can karma, a Hindu concept,
right?
And a concept in Jainism also, and in
I hadn't mentioned
Buddhism,
that yet. No, Jainism doesn't believe in a god. They're the most moral.
It's an atheistic religion.
Right, but so I didn't mention Jainism in any of my examples. So to go over what I said again,
that was me.
Right. Okay.
Not trying to obscure, but to clarify.
So my argument was there are other, like Christians and theists like to assert a being as the grounds of morality. There is zero evidence of this. It's just an assertion. I could assert a magical potato is the grounds of morality, and that will be equivalently justified by evidence. But the point I was bringing up is that there are other models of objective morality that are not a god, because there's no reason to think God is the only way or the best way to explain this, and there are lots of reasons to think it is not.
I don't think the Platonic and the karmic support what you're saying.
I'm sure you don't, but most people don't think Christianity or God can either, especially in academic philosophy. In academic philosophy, God-based morality is not taken seriously at all. For lots of problems which we can talk about. One sec. We can absolutely talk about the reasons why God-based morality does not work. But the point here is that academically, there are equally as good or better grounds of objective morality that have nothing to do with a god. So your question is how can you have objective morality without a god? You can have it in Platonic forms. You can have it in a priori abstracts. You can have it in karmic fields. All of those things. You can have it in undiscovered law of nature. You can have morality grounded in any object that does not entail a mind, and it can still be an objective moral fact. You do not need it to be grounded in a mind for any reason.
It seems speculative. So yet to be discovered law of nature, back to karma and Platonic forms.
Which is still better than a god, which is even more speculative.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm more of a Nietzschean than you are. I mean, I thought in Beyond Good and Evil, he argued very well. If there's no God, then there can be no morality or immorality, only interpretations of what's moral and immoral. I think he was right on the money. If there's no God, any
argument or evidence for that? Because I don't think you do.
I can prove to you I've read the book.
Oh, no. So the book, is there an argument or evidence for why you would need a God to have objective morality? And I would say there's probably not. I'm very familiar with these.
I would say to you, why would you believe there is objective morality?
The evidence of.
Let me clarify one thing, Tom. Sure. I'm not saying, often I speak to friends who are agnostics or atheists, and they think Christians are saying unless you're a theist, you can't be good, you can't be moral. Of course, that's nonsense.
Right.
But I would say unless there's a God, no one could be moral, because there would be no morality.
Yeah, but why?
That's my position.
Why? Like if I said, if there was no God, there can be no rocks. Like that wouldn't make sense, right? That's like, of course there could be rocks. Like the God doesn't. There's no reason why a mind would entail rocks. Like rocks could be a natural process.
Well, you're saying if there's no God, there. Yeah. If you, instead of a rock, you say the cosmos, then.
Well, just use a mundane example. Use something that we both agree, like this is not very special. It could just be a natural process, like clouds. Say clouds, baby. So just we agree clouds are a natural process. Clouds could come about by quantum fields, or they could come about by God. There's no reason why God would entail quantum fields. And the same thing applies to morality. If morality is a thing, which I believe it is, there is no reason to think a God must have entailed it any more than it could have come about by any of the other fundamental potential natures of reality.
I'm puzzled why you believe in morality. And again, I'm not saying,
right,
I'm not talking about your morality, or I'm not saying you're immoral, but why would you believe that it's not just a consensus or a feeling or preference?
Consistent patterns in moral intuition and moral progress.
In other words, values as opposed to morals. Like in postmodernism, there are no morals, simply values. But why don't you go in that direction?
Patterns in moral intuition and moral progress.
Okay, I'm just saying, why would an atheist need to believe that anything is absolutely right or wrong?
Well, no one needs to believe anything. Like theists don't, like there's no like logic.
You're asking me why I believe there needs to be a God if there's a moral universe. But I'm asking you, So I think that point is anterior to my answering this question. It's not a bad question, but if you believe it's a moral universe,
Yes.
where do those morals come from? And
There's
just saying an unknown scientific law or a karmic field or something like a Platonic form is not really much of an answer. I mean,
Well, I'm not
I mean,
sure what you mean by that. So, like, I think there's evidence of a phenomenon. This patterns of moral intuition, patterns of moral progress. That's the evidence of a phenomenon called morality, and there are lots of potential explanations of this phenomenon. Maybe it's evolution. There is no objective morality. I disagree, but it's possible. Maybe it's a god. Maybe God did it. That's a possibility. Maybe it's a karmic field. That's a possibility. Maybe it's a Platonic conjugate. That's a possibility. Maybe it's an a priori abstract. That's a possibility. All of these different phenomenon or hypothesis could explain the data of objective morality that we see. Patterns in moral intuition and moral progress. That's the evidence of why I believe there is a moral phenomenon. And then you have to look at the potential explanations and say which one is the best explanation that explains the data and makes predictions, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm sorry, Tom, but it sounds like you're describing moral discussion or moral progress, what others would consider to be moral progress, as opposed to morality itself.
What? So, I'm not sure what you mean. So, like, if morality exists, if there's an objective morality, and if it affects us and causes society to move in a particular direction, like a guiding force of some kind, then we would see a particular direction in the way societies and moral intuitions change over time. We do see this pattern over time. Therefore, there's reasonable to infer there is some guiding principle that causes this particular pattern to emerge.
So you believe in a guiding principle?
Yes, that's the same thing as any physics force. It's a guiding principle. Things fall, stuff moves, objects in
You may
motion remain in
believe in a
motion.
guiding principle more than I would. I mean, I'd like to think that God would be the guiding principle, but I'm not sure how much more moral our world is than it was 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago.
It's a lot more moral. That's like again, lots of consensus on this. Human nature has been improving significantly with each successive generation and increase in technology. We're becoming more moral. This is a separate conversation whether or not there's moral progress. But like, for example, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, the elimination of slavery, the valuing of the homeless, the valuing of the disabled, giving rights, voting rights to people, giving people more freedoms, like the our society has absolutely been getting more moral over time, but that's a separate topic. But
it sounds like you're describing Christian influence in society, because ultimately,
no,
abolition and women's rights and human rights come from Christianity.
they don't have anything to do with Christianity. And those happen in all religions, in all sections of the world, independent of religious belief. And they happen more in secular places than they do in religious places. In fact, we have to fight against religious bigotry in order to achieve many of those things. Those happen to do, again, those happen independently of Christianity.
So you'd rather live in Vietnam, Laos, Cuba?
No, I'd rather live in
North
Sweden,
Korea, or
Switzerland.
China?
No, I'd live in the secular nations that have no religion. Japan, Sweden, Denmark.
Japan, France, places like that.
Yep. That aren't religious, that are majority secular, non-religious. Those are the best societies, or the non-religious ones. But I want to go back to your question. So the reason I believe in morality is there is evidence. There's a phenomenon of a pattern in changes of morality. That's why I believe there is a thing that explains this phenomenon. And the question is which hypothesis best explains the phenomenon? Is it God? Is it undiscovered law of nature, a priori abstract, Platonic object, karma, whatever? Each of those act as an explanation of an objective grounds of morality. So you don't need a God to explain objective morality. Objective just means true, independent of opinion.
Yeah, but I think you may be confusing objective in the sense of motion and progress with what is ontological. I'm talking about the ontological basis of morality. You seem to be describing the way morality manifests in the world, which I have no problem with. But I'm asking about something, the anchor point that's outside of our frame of reference.
Right. Yeah. So
which I'm afraid is that empirical realm.
Well, no. So like if we see a mirage, there is a phenomenon. I see a mirage. Like there is no actual ocean there, right? And the question is, if I see something that looks like a mirage, is it just a mirage or is it an ocean? We want to know, is it subjective mirage? Is it objective ocean? There's a thing there objectively that causes the subjective experience.
Sure.
And so if morality is changing over time, that's the subjective experience. That's seeing the mirage. It could just be evolution. So it's just a mirage. There's nothing there. It could be caused by a real ocean, like karmic field, a priori abstract, Platonic object, undiscovered law. There could be an actual objective thing, which is morality, which is existing out there, which causes this sensation in us of the progress in morality. So the phenomenon that we directly see, like a mirage, is the progress in morality. That could be just the mirage, or it could be caused by an objective thing in the world, like an undiscovered law of physics, which is moral, like a Platonic object, like a karmic field, like a god. And so the cause of this phenomenon that we see is going to be potentially objective and can be explained by many different objective things. Objective means exist independent of opinion, subjective experience. It's a thing that exists.
And you put a god in your list.
Yes.
You put that twice in the list, which
yes. There are lots of different gods.
Lots of different gods. I mean, but comparing the Christian God to the other gods, now that gets really interesting.
Well, I'm not sure. So the point was just there can be objective models of morality that are not God that work equally as well or better than a God to explain objective morality. So there is, I agree, objective morality exists independent of humans, but we see its effect in humans. And so based on the effect in humans, we can make predictions about what the thing causing that would be. And the thing causing that isn't the experience. Those are two separate things. The experience itself is a result, like you said, caused by some objective thing which exists outside of the result. And that thing could be not a god. There's no reason to think it's a god. There's no reason to say it must be a god. That's not a thing. It could be lots of different things.
There's no reason to think it's not a god, though.
There's lots of reason to think it's not a god, but that was not a.
You said it's not God, but you put a god as one of the possibilities.
Right. So I'm trying to help you to understand that there are other alternatives to a god.
No, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, karmic field. I mean, I spent time with a Hindu priest recently. Just a few weeks ago with a Buddhist monk.
Okay.
They agree. Yeah. I mean, it's not talking about morality. If you're trying to be a strict Buddhist, doesn't actually make sense. I know Buddhists are sometimes great people and very compassionate, but the Buddha taught all distinctions are false. And karma itself is more of a mechanical thing than anything moral. You've got millions of rebirths, and the goal is to escape the cycle so that basically you'll stop existing. Or in the Hindu world, your soul is merged with the world soul. There's no opportunity even for relationship, let alone morality, because you have monism.
I don't understand what you're objecting
to. Contradict morality.
Well, so I don't understand what you're objecting to here specifically. Like the point here was
your illustrations. That was all.
Well, that doesn't object to my illustration. So my illustrations is morality can be grounded in a field like karma. Now you can say that there are different hypothetical models of karma that
karma is not a moral thing.
No, it is. It is absolutely a model of morality. That's pretty well understood in philosophy. But if there are multiple different models of karmic fields, dependent on the 10,000 different versions of Hinduism you go to, they're not all the same. Hinduism isn't even a religion. Hinduism is a class of religions.
Right.
But
correct.
If any of these could potentially be a grounds for objective morality, whether or not you think this particular model of morality is correct is a different topic. Now, I agree. I don't think it accurately maps onto what morality is. I don't think Christianity accurately maps. I think Christianity is worse than karma when it comes to describing morality. God drowned millions of babies in the global flood. I don't think it can be moral, but that's a different question. The question is it logically possible for morality to be grounded in an object that is not a god? The answer is yes. Can it be grounded in a karmic field? Yes. Can it be grounded in a Platonic object? Yes. Can it be grounded in undiscovered law of physics? Yes. And then the question is which one of those best accounts for the data, which seemed to be the question you were addressing there. The karmic field doesn't seem to map onto what we think of as morality. Therefore, it's not a good answer to the question. And I agree, that's the second question. But the first question is, can morality be grounded in something other than a god? The answer is absolutely yes. Everyone in academia says yes. There's no reason to think God is the exclusive answer, but many theists don't understand that. So
and many philosophers are theists, and I think they do think that way. They do understand that.
Then they're wrong. So there's a recent poll, Phil Survey's paper, 2020 paper, which is a poll of academic philosophers. It asks how many of them are theists. 15%, something along those lines. How many are atheists? 73% was atheists, no God. And then they ask if they're moral realists. 65% are moral realists. I mean, approximately 75% are atheists, say there is no God, of academic professional philosophers, and 65% of academic professional philosophers believe in objective morality. The best, most accepted versions of morality in academic philosophy are not a God. God is a terrible answer for lots of reasons. The only point I'm trying to get across to you is that of the academically accepted rational positions to ground objective morality, God is not the only one. It's not even close. It's not even in the top 10.
I get that. You're saying 77%. Yeah, you said 15%, and then 8% undecided or abstaining. If I did the subtraction right, that's still a lot of. It's a large group, by the way. I believe as a Christian that morality is an extension of God's personality. I avoid the Euthyphro dilemma. It's not wrong because God says it's wrong. It's not wrong in the sense that God himself is subject to this law, but it's simply, if there's a God, the extension of who he is, that just defines what is right and wrong. To me, that is much more eloquent and explanatory than saying, well, there may be 5 or 6 things that may be the objective ground of morality. So, I mean, what do you think of that, what I'm saying?
I mean, I can make up an explanation for something that I don't know and say my explanation sounds nice and sounds better than the
I'm not making
other
an
possibilities.
explanation. I'm anticipating an objection.
I didn't say anything about the Euthyphro dilemma. That was not my.
No, you didn't. But I'm anticipating what maybe you or maybe all the people who are following you may be interested in.
Well, I'd love to talk about that.
I don't know what you think. I think God is. Maybe the God you don't believe in is a God that I don't believe in either.
Well, I don't believe in any God. I don't think any conscious entity of any mind of any variety could ever ground objective morality. So I imagine you believe God has a mind. Well, because it makes it inherently subjective. But that's, do you understand?
If it's rooted in God, infinite personal God, then it's not subjective.
You just said if it's grounded in a subjective being, it's not subjective. I don't understand.
Oh, I meant to say, I thought I said an infinite personal God.
So, and
are you that God?
Well, no, I didn't. You didn't literally say subjective. Are you that God?
Mm-mm.
Am I that God?
Definitely, you and I wouldn't qualify. Neither of us would.
So it is a person. It is not us.
Right. Personal. Yeah.
What does the word subjective mean?
Well, it could mean a couple of things. It could mean you're not thinking clearly. You're delusional. It could be that it's related to a subject.
Right. So it's a person related to a person who is not me, who is not you, and it's God. That's a person. So if it's related to a subject who is a person, that would be subjective, right? So God is a subjective entity. He is a being that is not me, is not you.
I don't think that's the way. I don't think that's the right way to describe God. It seems to be.
Well, he's a subject, right? He is a single subject of consciousness, and we are a single subject of consciousness. They are.
It makes it sound like he's not ultimate if he's a single subject of consciousness. I mean, I believe in an infinite God, and
well, it wouldn't make a difference because subjective again means there is an individual consciousness. I'm not him. You're not him. We have different consciousnesses. We are all subjective consciousnesses, subjective conscious experience. God is one too.
If any being's consciousness is automatically subjective, then of course God's subjective. But now I think we've lost the distinction between subjective and objective.
Well, objective is true, independent of personal feelings, tastes, or opinions, or the subject of a mind. Yes.
Right. So do you think something can be subjective and objective at the same time?
Sort of. I mean, it can
by your definition,
exist.
Maybe that describes the God you don't believe in. God is objective and subjective.
Well, all subjective experiences objectively exist. So it's objectively the case that I have qualia. I have a sense experience, but it is my subjective sense experience. So the question is if it was objectively true for all beings, then it's how it would have to apply to you and to God and to everyone for it to be objectively true. Now, if it's subjectively true, that means it's true for me. I have my subjective experience and you don't see that. So it's a subjective experience. If morality was objective, then it would have to be true independent of a subjective consciousness. Can't be grounded in a mind. Can't be God decided, God consciously invokes it. That's subjective, just like I like chocolate ice cream. It's subjective. For it to be objective, it'd have to be grounded in a non-mind.
I don't know, Tom.
Non
You're sounding pretty postmodern here.
what?
This is the way we describe values, not morals.
What? Yes, that's values are subjective, and so if values are grounded in a mind, they are subjective. That's why it can't be grounded in God, because that would make it subjective. For it to be objective, it can't be grounded in a mind, like
But
other objective things.
you're bending the definition of God. I mean, this kind of God is not all wise. He's not omniscient.
It wouldn't make a difference.
Oh, I
None
think
of
it would
that.
make a difference if
No.
he's all knowing and he's omnibenevolent and all the other omnis.
Is he still a
Then
subjective mind?
then he's objective. He's subjective in the second sense of subjective, in that he is mind. But
Right,
no,
so
he's objective. What I'm saying is I'm saying that he's objective.
objective means true
existent.
independent of mind. That's what objective means. It exists true independently of any opinions, feelings, or mind. That's all it means.
Okay, but we're not talking, but not the divine mind. Unless you're
No.
just ruling out theism from the start, then, but otherwise, the divine
Well,
mind.
where is this magical definition and objective that says not the divine mind? Because I missed that in every dictionary. Dictionaries don't say it's objective or it's subjective in every mind except this mind. That's not a thing in dictionaries. It's always it's any mind. Subjective means contingent on a mind. There's no exception clause there. There's this special kind of a mind that's an exception. No, this is one of the biggest problems in philosophy.
No exception clause except when it comes to infinite beings.
Where does it say that? Can you find me a dictionary that says that subjective doesn't apply to infinite beings? Is that somewhere in the definition of subjective that I missed?
No, you won't find that anywhere, and you know that.
Right,
But I think
because
you
it's
also
not
know
a part
that
of the definition.
the classic understanding of who God is means a God who's all good, he's all wise, he's all powerful, and so for something to be anchored in that God, that is a sufficient grounds for for morality to be truly objective.
No, it's
better than anything else.
That's called special pleading.
Social consensus. Well, it's a kind of pleading because I'm hoping you'll understand maybe what the Christian God is, and I'm a bit of a disadvantage. I don't know. I don't presume to know what your experience has been with Christians, but you asked me for some reasons that I believe that there's a God. I mentioned miracles. I would mention the person of Jesus Christ, which I think itself is just amazing. I don't know if you've read the Gospels, but
yes, cover to cover, multiple times.
Yeah, but I do believe in Christianity, though not maybe the institutional form that most.
Well, I agree. I would not criticize the institution of Christianity as if it was a representation of the Christian God, because those are two separate entities. So I agree that it's not a fair comparison to make, and I would not do that. I would only criticize the Christian God based off of what it said it did in the Bible, and that is a fair comparison. So like 2 Kings 2:24, where God sent the bears to maul some kids because they made fun of a bald guy, that I can absolutely judge God on. That's on him. Or when he flooded the world and drowned millions of babies all over the world, that I can judge God on. Destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, I can judge God on that. Killing the firstborns in Egypt, I can judge God on that. Those are pretty good ways to contrast those actions to how we understand what morality is. And is a being who does those things something that could accurately map onto objective morality? And the answer is clearly no. Just like you said, how karmic fields don't seem to accurately map onto how we understand morality. A God that drowns millions of babies does not seem to map onto morality as well. But I did want to comment a little bit on what you said before. So my point here was just that subjective is defined as anything contingent on a mind. If morality is contingent on God's mind, it must be subjective. Now, you can grant it's not contingent on God's mind. It's part of his nature. His mind has no part of it whatsoever. Then it could be objective. I can grant that part. But if it's contingent on God's mind, it is inherently subjective. If it's ever contingent on a mind.
I'm not sure we can, however, separate his nature from his mind.
Right. And if you can't, then that means he can't be an objective basis. That would be a problem. Because just to be clear, like the academic definitions of subjective and objective. Objective is stance independent moral truths. That's what objective morality means. Stance independent normative facts. Objective facts would be those. Subjective facts would be stance dependent moral facts. And so if it's contingent on God's conscious stance, conscious opinions, then it would be subjective morality inherently. For it to be objective, it has to be stance independent, has to be true, independent of any conscious feelings he has whatsoever.
All right, Tom, I got to respond to some of those examples.
Sure.
Because they're heavy, and I feel the weight. And I understand that many Christians take the flood story literally instead of as a rewriting of the common flood story in the Hittite and Babylonian and Sumerian and other cultures. But I don't. But I do believe firstborn. You mentioned the plague against the firstborn. The mauling of the I don't know
Children.
that these were just kids. I think they're more like a gang. Or
if they're making fun of a bald guy, I don't think mauled to death by bears is the appropriate punishment. I don't care how
I don't
old
think
they
it's
are.
he was sensitive to his alopecia. I think there's something deeper going on. I mean, look at me. You know, fortunately for me, I don't really care. Though I learned I can grow hair down here if I can't grow it up there. But the one who gives life, if there's a God who gives life, he would have the right to give it. He have the right to take it away. You have the right to judge. The judgment day follows from there being morality in the universe. Obviously, in this life, things are not fair. Things are not settled up. Things are not balanced. So it's reasonable to think that later, at another point after this life or outside of this world, things will be balanced. So if there's a God who gives life, a God would have the right to take away life. And also, maybe God has reasons. You know, people say if there's a God, he would have created a perfect world with no pain and suffering. I don't really buy that. There would be a world with no punishment. Everything would just be happy. I don't buy that either. I think if God could have done that, he would have done that. But I have no problem seeing that God's right to discipline, to punish, even to take life. Though I'm deeply distressed when people use that as an excuse to say, yeah, when that's what we're going to do, we're going to take life, because Jesus was very clear we're not to take the lives even of our enemies. I'm talking too much. Please, back to you.
Oh yeah, sure. So I would say that is the common apologetic, but it seems like it would be counter to all of the evidence. So for example, if I said, let's say we have evidence, I don't know if I believe you're an old earth creationist, is that correct?
Nope.
No young earth creationist?
No.
No? Oh, okay. So I just want to use one of those as an example. Say that
I mean, I'm a theistic evolutionist, a creationary.
So old earth creationism says that God created the world 14.8 billion years ago. Young earth creationism says God created.
Yeah, I think young earth, they're off, and old earth, they fall into the God of the gaps. And no, I don't believe that. I have no problem. I'm a member of Biologos. I have no problem with current biological theory.
Okay, cool. So
no
if
problem
we have lots of evidence that evolution happened, for example, and young earth creationist says, nope, God popped everything into existence 50 years ago, or however long, 6,000 years ago. That goes against Wednesday. Yeah. So that goes against all of the evidence. Like all of the evidence shows evolution is real. It happens. Maybe God created it at the big Aobagenus, whatever, but evolution is real. And so if young earth creationists want to make this claim that goes against all of the evidence, that's a pretty ridiculous claim. The same thing applies to morality. We have lots and lots of evidence of morality. Drowning babies is immoral. It's not a good thing to do. And so if God drowned babies, I know you said you didn't believe in the flood, so it's just an example. Then that would go against
that many Christians don't take that literally, but yes, I do believe in a judgment day and I believe in heaven and hell, though probably not in the sense that you think I do. So I'm sure there are things you'll find objectionable in my beliefs, even the.
Oh yeah, I don't want to specifically target your beliefs here. I'm just talking in general that if we describe God as the basis of objective morality, and God did lots of things that go against all of our evidence of what is moral, then to say that he is the grounds because of some ad hoc reason, like he has some reason to do it, or he has the right to, if he gives life, he can take it away. That seems immoral, but you can use that as an ad hoc reason to try to accommodate the data. But that seems equivalent to when young earth creationists try to make up some explanation to make a young earth model make sense, even though it goes against all the data. So if you want to go against all of the data to make your hypothesis fit, that seems like a bad hypothesis. A better hypothesis of objective morality would be one that says the most moral world is one that There is no involuntary imposition of will. That's my model. I like that model. And if there
No
was a perfect,
involuntary imposition of will, you said.
yes, that is my model.
Um,
And
and
just to clarify,
I
like
think
if
I would agree with that.
that may cause some problems with what God did, but okay. The point here is that if we're trying to say
I
what is
mean,
the best description of objective morality, one that creates a world that there's no involuntary imposition of will, that's a good description of morality. One that kills lots of people against their will is a bad description of morality. And so the better hypothesis is the one that more fits the data, which seems to not be the one that kills lots of babies.
yeah, I think we're to characterize, because of a few events, mainly in the Old Testament, to characterize God the way you are is overreaching.
Well, you granted the firstborn killing of Egypt, right? That's lots of babies.
Yeah, I'm listening.
So if hypothesis A and hypothesis B both are trying to explain morality, one kills lots of babies, one says you should never kill babies under any circumstance. The one that more accommodates the data seems to be the better hypothesis here. Killing babies seems to make it a less good
But
hypothesis.
if you're culling these data from the Bible, I think you need to look at the bigger picture. What
Well,
God
I don't
does.
see the reason as being important because there's always a better solution. You could have just not killed the babies. That would be a better solution. Like if God
Um,
just didn't kill all the firstborns, God would have been less immoral. That would have been better.
I feel the weight of what you're saying, Tom. Yeah, and I'm not saying I like this any more than you do. If there had been a different way than Jesus dying on the cross, a better way, that God would have done that. That would have been better. But was there a better way? When
It was
Israel
definitely a
goes into
logically possible better way.
the the okay, getting a little mired down here, but I mean, again, I feel the weight of what you're saying, but if there's a God and there's a judgment day, and there's a possibility that we might not just be punished, but even cease to exist. Well, if there's a God, that's within his rights to judge us. He's the creator. In other words, we're talking about morality, and I'm defending the morality of the biblical God. But I'm afraid I'm making even worse than you think, because I'm saying if God is moral, there has to be punishment of sin. Judgment Day makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I do know a lot of people, even pastors, who say they don't believe in Judgment Day, or they think if there is, everyone's going to pass, everyone will be fine. No, I don't believe that. God wouldn't be good if he didn't punish sin. And unfortunately, what happened in Egypt had to do with the sin of the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh. There were multiple opportunities to avoid this, nine, in fact, and he brought it on himself. So we're talking about why I believe in Christianity. I mentioned the character of Jesus Christ, and I'm happy that you've read the Gospels multiple times. Were you not impressed by what you saw in Jesus?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. Like, I think
It's a kind of open question, open-ended.
well, it's like if you ask me, was I impressed by the character of Luke Skywalker? I'm like, maybe, but whether or not I was, I don't think has anything to do with whether or not I would believe it was true. I think those are two separate questions. So
Of course, they are.
right. So like, I think that many of the teachings of Jesus are good. I don't think he was perfect. I don't think he was the best model of morality. I think he could have been far better. But I think that overall, compared to most humans, yes, he was great compared to most humans. I
How
like
would
the
you
socialist.
how would you
Go
have
ahead.
improved him? I mean, how would he have been better?
Slavery is wrong. You should have just said that. It was slavery wrong. Period. Don't do slavery. End of sentence. Ever. You should not own another human being. Period. That would have been great. Huge improvement.
So he would have been a better Jesus if he had directly attacked social ills.
Well, I think like to put it into a more general sense, I'd say for Jesus to have been approved, he should have more accurately described moral truths than he did. And one of the ways to do that would be to directly say, you shall not own another human being as property, period. That one would have been great. Or if you had a more general case, like it is always immoral to impose involuntary impositions of will, that would have been great. So just giving direct moral answers would have been phenomenal. That would have definitely been an improvement for sure.
So
I also
you're
think
aware that the Bible teaches that kidnapping is a very serious crime, and you're also aware that
sometimes,
slavery in the ancient world is not the same as the chattel slavery in the country of our birth, because I'm American like you.
well, no, that's actually only partially true. Many of it was, in fact, chattel slavery in ancient times as well.
Well, you're right. Yes, it was. That's right. It's not like, oh, it'd be fine to be a slave in ancient time. No, because you've been captured in war, or you're paying off a debt. But
sexual slavery was a thing. The Barbary slave trade was a thing. The Roman slave trade was a thing. Yeah, slavery
right,
back then was just
in
as
the Bible,
bad, if
there's
not
no
worse.
sexual slavery. The closest you get is the captive of war.
Yeah, the
You're not
young
allowed.
girls after they killed all of their parents and gave them to the generals. Yes, I remember that one. That one was a
Yeah, they're told you have to give her a month to mourn, and then you marry her. But there's no sex unless you marry. Then you have to wait at least a month. That's very different, say, to this sexual slavery of Islam, or well, what normally happens in war, the rape. That's strictly forbidden in the Bible. Why are we talking about this, Tom?
we're going through morality and the immoral things that God supposedly did, and you said he had a right to do these things, and I
I
said
did
that.
say that, and I was asking about Jesus because I do a lot of teaching and preaching and teaching from the Gospel of John lately, and you could say a premise of John, one of the main premises, is that if you want to see God, look at Jesus. If the all good, all powerful, all wise God was a human being, this is what you would see. And I was asking you how you would improve, and you're thinking that he would need to challenge social ills directly.
I wouldn't say challenge social laws. I would say accurately express morality in his words. That would be the part I would say.
Well, I mean, he talks about sex outside of marriage. He talks about theft, adultery. I mean, there are a lot of passages where he talks about what is sinful.
Well, right, but there's lots of books that talk about math, but they aren't accurate math books that accurately describe how to do algebra. So there's a difference between talking about
Did you
some good
study?
things.
Did you study math at university?
Yes, unfortunately.
Like my dad, I worked for the math department at Duke the whole time I was an undergrad, and I'm impressed by math, but I ended up somewhere else. But Jesus does talk about morality.
Well, no,
I mean,
so my point here is that there's a difference between talking about it and giving an express description of what the thing is in its essence. So if Jesus was,
but the thing in its essence, what most Christians would agree is the epitome of his teaching is the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5-7, which describes the character of someone who's godly. It calls people to a far higher standard than what they were used to. It was upsetting to many. But if you want to see morality, the kind of people we should be, not just better versions of ourselves, but godly in a righteous way, the Sermon on the Mount, it's right there. I mean, it's in other parts of the Gospels as well. But
well, so let's take that. Let's take the Sermon of the Mount as an example. Can I improve the Sermon of the Mount? Yes, I can add. There's lots of different ways to do it. The one I like is I'm going to steal it from Matt Dillahunty. It's "Thou shalt not own other human beings as property." Period. If you added that one sentence, it would have been a million times better.
The Sermon on the Mount is not a "thou shalt not" kind of passage. Okay, so Matt,
yes, but if it was, it would have been better if you added the sentence.
So you seem to think that the more words, the better.
Well, no, the more accurate a like I could remove most of the words from the Sermon on the Mount because most of them are irrelevant. Like so, the way I would do the Sermon on the Mount, I would say as any involuntary imposition of will is immoral. We should help everyone to achieve as much happiness as possible and only restrict them in cases where it is done to prevent a greater harm. Don't own other human beings as property, period. I think that would have been great. That part, perfect. We're done. We can just obey this thing. You're done.
You seem to be very hung up on the issue of slavery.
It's an easy example.
Why not? Why didn't he speak against infanticide, exposure, abortion, euthanasia, other things that were common? Why didn't he speak more often about the corruption of the political and religious structure, which he did talk about. You seem to be thinking that unless he
Well, I was just using that as
challenges
an
it, he's
example.
either weak or he's maybe confused or not doing the right thing. He's trying to transform people one by one, and anyone who internalized the morality in the heart of Jesus would be he'd be an incredible person, or she would be an incredible person.
Well, so
And
the way I'm trying to assess this,
and if
I'm
they had
saying,
slaves, they would set them free, or they would treat them with love, which was
okay.
the ideal back in the book of Exodus anyway.
Well, so you asked, can I improve it? And so can I improve the
The
Gospel on the
Sermon on
Mount?
the
So
Mount, yeah.
Sermon on the
You
Mount,
said
yes.
by lengthening it, by adding at least
Well, I would shorten
one.
it. So I'd shorten it, get rid of a lot of the stuff. I'd just say, like, if I could just have one sentence, it would be, "Thou shalt not own other human beings as property." And if we added that sentence anywhere in the Bible, Sermon on the Mount, wherever, that would have helped society significantly more than pretty much any of the other passages in the Bible at all. So that one sentence, if it was added to the Bible at any point, would have made society better infinitely. We can just grant that Christianity would grow at the same rate or whatever. If that part was in there, society would have been significantly better. People would have been better.
I'm not sure, Tom, they would have paid attention to it. I mean, like there's a passage in First Timothy that speaks directly against the slave trade. The slave trade is mentioned in Revelation, I think it's chapter 18. It's not a positive thing. Those who served as servants, they had rights. So even when you couldn't kidnap people, but if you ended up with a servant, you had to treat them in a certain way, as with dignity. That's not the ancient ideal of slavery.
Right. So if you give them a wife, you can own them forever. If you can only beat your wife with a stick the size of your thumb, you can. Oh, what was the one where you can beat a slave until an inch of his death? That's okay, no problem. Just don't kill him. That part. Yeah, I remember. I remember a lot of these passages about how you can treat your slaves.
Those first couple
And
passages aren't in the Bible, but yeah, there is something about. Yeah. So,
wait, which
but
ones aren't in the Bible? The one where you can.
if he lives, you're not guilty of manslaughter.
Right. So what the
But
first one I mentioned
Tom,
was.
this is the regulation of suboptimal practices. The Bible, you could say, it doesn't speak directly against polygamy, against slavery, against war, but when it depicts these things, I mean, no one would want to be involved in polygamy.
Except most of the
Regulation of
patriarchs
suboptimal
of the Old
practices.
Testament.
Yeah, well, obviously some of these continue into the New Testament. The Romans, they say like a third of the humans in the Roman Empire were slaves, something like that.
Right, but I mean, mentioning polygamy, most of Abraham, not Abraham, many of the different kings and Old Testament patriarchs did
Yeah,
polygamy all the
that's
time.
right.
It was
And
kind
the
of a
Bible
thing
shows
God did.
how messed up their lives were, partly as a
Well,
result of it's not the ideal. The ideal is the Adam and Eve ideal. It's one man, one woman. So
but that
polygamy is never portrayed in a positive light.
but the point
Slavery
here
is
was
never portrayed in a positive light, for that
not so
matter.
sure about that one. But the point here is that can we improve the Bible and Jesus? Yes, absolutely. It's very, very easy, extremely easy to do that.
It'd be
Yes,
easy for any of us to say, okay, I would add this clause or this clause.
and that would be an improvement. So I think,
Uh,
like, if I'm going
maybe
to
it would
write,
be for, yeah, maybe it would be an improvement for a while, but you know, I'm pretty hesitant to try to improve on the Sermon on the Mount.
okay,
I mean, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. I mean, if that's you, you're going to treat people with love. So these issues are going to resolve themselves. Anyway, but I was saying, why do I believe in Christianity? Because of the amazing person of Jesus. That's why I asked you if you read the Gospels. Yeah, sure. I've read them and I continue to read them. I have experience. I mean, you can't rule that out. If someone has an experience of God, I believe that there's a God. But I know the ability of, any mind's capacity for self-deception. So I don't lead with that. But it would be strange. I'd be remiss if I didn't say I've experienced God. That's something that's hard to relate outside of the context of relationship. That is, we're getting together for coffee, or we're doing sports together, or we're having another discussion, and maybe we will meet. But I have no desire to control you or to bend your mind using information. That so when I talk about experience, I'm not talking about I'm talking about something that's personal that can be shared, but in a relationship.
Right. So in the
It doesn't sound
context
very
of
scientific, but
well, in the context of personal experience, I would say that I think you mentioned that there's always a like the problem of you could be deceiving yourself or something, and I think
yep.
that's true. There are tens of thousands of fallacies, biases, illusions, delusions, misconceptions, hallucinations that human brains suffer from. And so, for personal experience to be trustable or reliable, I think you would have to find a method that can overcome those things before it was rational to believe that it actually happened. Any more so than like alien experiences or ghost experiences
Wait, you
or
don't believe in aliens?
oh my god, no, the
You
aliens, they're
don't believe
fake.
in ghosts?
Nope, nope, no aliens, no
I'm
ghosts.
leading somewhere. No, I don't believe in ghosts. I believe that the likelihood of there being life in other worlds is pretty high, but for the same reasons I believe that life evolved in our world. But have they visited our world? Uh, that'd be really a tough thing. Travel for
Travel
1,000
faster than the speed of
generations.
light.
And yeah, there's some real problems with that, as there are with the absolute infinities, which I meant to discuss earlier. The evidence of the resurrection, the death of Christ on the cross, the empty tomb, the transformation of his followers, the message, they're being convinced that he rose from the dead. This is not a slam dunk proof of the resurrection, but those are three facts, right, that most scholars would admit. He died on a cross, that he was buried, that the tomb was empty, and that his earliest followers, those who actually knew him, believed he had risen from the dead. Does that make sense to you?
Sure. I don't see why that's evidence. So I believe that they did genuinely believe that. I don't believe that's evidence that actually happened.
Now, if their evidence was based on something they heard at third hand, it'd be very different from them actually seeing him after his death.
Well, I can just grant that. I say, let's say they have the exact firsthand experience. They did it yesterday. Let's say we were living at the same time period. I'd still say it's not evidence that it actually happened.
What would count as evidence in your mind for the resurrection of Christ having taken place? What would
Novel testable predictions?
for a unique, non-repeatable event? I mean, what I mean is that biblically, Christ is the first fruits of the resurrection, 1 Corinthians 15. The second resurrection that will take place will be when he comes back. Technically, there are no resurrections in the Old Testament. They're not in the New Testament except Jesus, because those people would have died again.
Lazarus and the people.
But it's
like
not a resurrection in the full sense of resurrection. There's no resurrection body, because resurrection involves a transformation. And biblically, this happened only to Jesus. Those who came back to life, they died again. However you take it, they're still mortal. They died.
Right.
So I'm not trying to split hairs, but there is theologically a big difference between a revivification, if I can use that word, and a resurrection, which has a very technical meaning. And I'm not going to criticize you.
No, that's fine.
I was asking you what would count as evidence, and then you said you've testable
novel testable predictions.
Yeah, in the case of this, there's no claim that there'll be another person with a resurrection body until the end of time. So that's a long way.
We wouldn't need to have a novel prediction of specifically resurrection. It would, like, any novel predictions are fine. So like if you said, well, to use an example of the courtroom analogy and the historical analogy, if I went into a courtroom today and there were 12 people who said that they had their best friend rise from the dead, it would immediately get thrown out of court. No one would take it seriously. Don't care. Your eyewitnesses happened yesterday. So like the Bible, the Gospels were written 30, 40 years after the fact, not by eyewitnesses, not by the apostles, by a group of people. They copied from one another. Let's just forget all that. Let's the best.
I'm not sure you could just throw that out.
Well, no. I'm saying
the Gospels are anonymous, but
well, let's just grant the best possible evidence I could possibly give you. Apostles live today. They are alive. this just happened yesterday. We go to a courtroom and present this evidence. So let's just forget all the problems. Let's give the best possible evidence we can possibly give to your case.
Sounds good.
This would still be thrown out of court. The fact that people see dead loved ones is extremely common. It's called a bereavement delusion. People see them together. These happen in groups where they
Yes,
see the
they do.
same phenomenon, and it is explained by a natural process called a bereavement delusion, as well as communal reinforcement is another common example. So the fact that you see, taste, interact with, talk with a dead loved one is something that happens to a large portion of people who experience a dead loved one. It's like 30 to 60%. Huge portion of humans experience dead loved ones after they have died. So the fact that the apostles genuinely had this experience, I grant that 100% real
But
thing.
Tom, there's a
And that
big difference. They
sure, what was
didn't
that?
claim to see a dead loved one. They claimed that Jesus was alive. That's
So,
quite different from, oh yeah,
those are
I
the
saw
same.
Grandpa. We had a discussion. He's dead, but no, he's alive now. So that's in a different category than the bereavement
No,
delusion.
the bereavement delusions, the people claim to have seen the dead loved one risen again. They claim that. That's a common claim. We
Did
know
the
it's
dead one
false.
risen again, or they
Yes.
claim to see the dead one? And
Both. It's both. There's lots of very common both.
I've actually never heard. I may just be ignorant. But to say that, yeah, my relative died, but he lives again. Now here's
Yep.
his address. Let's go talk to him.
Yep.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. That's extremely common. So like people who are in superstitious mindsets who don't have a basis in science, people in third world countries, yes, they will say that. They say that all the time. It's extremely common. So because bereavement delusion is an experience at the brain, people genuinely believe it. They genuinely believe their loved one is really there and that you can go talk to them.
Yes, sure. I've heard of that a lot. But
It's the
I've
same
only
with the
heard
apostles.
it's the dead person, not the living person. The
No,
disagreement was, was he alive?
okay, so this part's really, really common. You can just Google it, that bereavement delusions, especially in third world countries, cause people to believe their dead loved ones have actually risen. That is a common phenomenon. It's not uncommon. But the point here is
But I
that
think you're forgetting the psychological dimension of what happened here. They were not expected to see him.
okay.
There was
Well, I don't think that matters.
resistance. You've got the skeptics, James, the brother of the Lord, and also Paul. They're convinced
Yeah, I don't think that matters either.
against their will. There was no bereavement in Paul's case because he didn't have any relationship with Jesus. Now, James, the brother of the Lord, he was his younger brother. Maybe there was some degree of sense of bereavement, but not with the Apostle Paul.
There was especially with Apostle Paul.
Gives us
But
1/4 of the New Testament. Why especially with the Apostle Paul?
because he was a persecutor of Christians. So people who persecute a particular ideology can feel internalized grief
Oh,
for
you're saying
doing
he felt
so.
some kind of guilt.
Yeah,
The funny
that's
thing is,
bereavement.
he insists himself, if you look at what he says in the New Testament, that he always acted with a good conscience. He doesn't seem to have been acting or compensating because of some internalized guilt feelings.
Well,
He says
people are
he
not
always
very
had a
good.
good conscience.
People are not very good at accurately describing their psychological subconscious state. They're pretty bad at that. In fact, they're terrible at that. No one can do that. But so there's a few things I wanted to mention there.
Granted.
So like you mentioned that the apostles didn't expect to see Jesus risen. Bereavement delusions aren't common, don't increase or decrease in experience based on your expectation that they happen. Most people don't expect to see a dead loved one. That's a pretty common thing. Bereavement delusions still happen. So that's not really a factor that would affect whether or not they saw a bereavement delusion. Whether you believe it's going to happen doesn't really make a difference. The other thing you said was that there were skeptics. Also, the same thing. Communal reinforcement, the way it works is there are multiple people who experience this. Many don't believe or don't have an explanation. Somebody else in the room has an explanation and they pass the explanation on and convince the disbelievers. Also really common. I don't see why that would be a significant factor.
Well, reading the account of how Paul came to believe doesn't read anything like that. And there are 3 accounts.
Or I'm talking about just the
itself.
Paul wasn't there. I'm talking about the Gospels and the seeing the risen Jesus part. So the Paul
I was
part.
talking about the skeptic.
Well, I was talking about Thomas, where the one who had to poke. That's a skeptic too. So I was talking about the skeptic in the experience. That's explained by bereavement delusion, communal reinforcement.
Michael Shermer is the skeptic. Have you ever debated him?
Well, we're on the same side, so I haven't debated against him. No.
I mean, we've had 3 debates, But the third one was
Cool.
a free roaming discussion like the one you and I are having.
Yeah.
We've met 4 times,
Awesome.
and he I get his journals. I get that. I'm a skeptic. I'm very suspicious of claims. I'm trying hard to evaluate and not be stupid and not be subjective in the negative sense, and it seems you are too. But we were talking about the resurrection.
Right.
They had a meal with him. This wasn't just
Yep. Common bereavement delusions.
this is a
also
physical. Yeah, okay. I think you may be stretching it, banking a little bit too much on that. I mean, there are different arguments against the resurrection, and I don't know. That doesn't convince me.
Okay.
But you seem to be saying nothing would convince you.
The novel predictions would convince me.
Well, there
So
are
like,
there are a lot of predictions in the Bible, right? There's some prophecies that are pretty impressive.
I don't think so. I've read them all. That's a pretty common argument. They're pretty terrible, but yes, if there were accurate prophecies in the Bible, that would be good evidence. So like,
So for example, Jesus says that he says that Jerusalem is going to be totally destroyed. In one of his parables, wedding banquet, Matthew 22, it'll be burned. There's an army coming. But what the Jews expected was that the Messiah would come and drive out the Romans, and it was the exact opposite. They don't accept the Messiah, and God uses the Romans just as he used the Babylonians in the 6th century BC. Jesus' prediction of the destruction of the temple, that was pretty spot on. The predictions that the Roman Empire would fall, which we see in the book of Revelation, were probably as hard to process as predicting that the United States will fall.
I don't think so. So during its long history, Jerusalem has been destroyed twice, completely besieged 23 times, attacked 52 times, and captured and recaptured 44 times. Predicting war events, especially during that time period, is extremely easy. If you want to make that a successful prediction, you need to give a date and a time. Say it will happen here, and this is the exact date it happens, and then that would be a great prediction. Simply saying that the temple will be destroyed is like, I can predict my house will be destroyed by fire. It's going to get eventually. That's probably going to be true.
He said it would happen.
Prediction.
It would happen in that generation. So it wasn't.
He also said he was going to return in this generation.
He said he was going to return and destroy the temple, which I believe he did in 70 AD.
Well, no, I meant
but that's not the second coming. That's not the judgment day. That's a limited judgment day. Judgment on. I mean, there are many judgment days and many comings. The language of God coming through the clouds, which is a metaphor, but to rescue or vindicate or punish. There are many of these in both testaments.
Right. So the point here is that the ambiguous language of "I can return in this generation" can be applied into, at very least, a 2,000-year time scale. So it's not a very good prediction. Like if I said my house will be burned down in fire within this generation, and by this generation I mean the next 2,000 to 4,000 years, it's not a great prediction. It's a pretty terrible prediction.
But that's not what the generation meant. I mean, and it happened less than 40 years later.
Right. So
anyway, we were talking about prophecy. You weren't that impressed. We're moving into a different subject here.
Right. So the reason those prophecies don't work in the Bible is because they suffer from an ambiguity fallacy. If you tried to publish that in an academic paper, it would be tossed out. That's not a prediction. If you want a prediction,
of course it would. That's the wrong genre. That's not the way it's written.
Well, it's not reliable.
They're often rich with metaphor anyway.
Yes, that's the problem. That's what an ambiguity fallacy is.
Yeah, but it's also prophecy is a genre, and apocalyptic is a genre, and sadly, this is greatly misunderstood today.
Well, so to go back, what would be evidence would be accurate predictions or prophecies in the Bible. To be an accurate prediction or prophecy, it has to be specific, has to meet the current standards of like science of saying this will happen at this date, at this time, with specificity, because ambiguity, for each potential interpretation of a statement, the statement is an additional guess. So if you have a statement that says There is a man named Bob standing over there, but I don't discriminate on how long the over there could be. Every foot is a wrong answer. So over there, he's not there, there. All of those are wrong. So because the statement can encapsulate all of the different potential lengths up until we find Bob, that's a billion failed tests and one successful test if I find a Bob over there. For it to be a prediction, you have to say Bob is standing 87 feet in that direction. Now, there's one possible answer here. If you don't find Bob at 87
I see
feet,
what you're
wrong.
doing. I don't think you're. I'm not sure we're talking about the same here. Biblical prophecy is rarely something predictive or specific in that way.
Right.
The prophecy doesn't. It's not like it's new truth. Prophecy calls people to obey what's been revealed. In the Old Testament, the prophets say, obey the Torah. And if not, based on what the Torah itself says, Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, you'll be ultimately exiled. So the prophets are hardly ever talking about something generations and generations or millennia later. They're talking about things that will happen soon. Like, you're not going to come back from this battle, you'll die in this battle. Or this will happen within the next 2 years. But there's an immediacy, and prophecy it's a challenge to people to obey what's been revealed. Many people think prophecy, they're thinking Nostradamus and they're thinking documentaries they've seen on TV. That's not really the nature of biblical prophecy.
Right, just to clarify, I wasn't saying that was what they were. I'd say that's what they would need to be evidence. So we were talking about what would convince me or what would I consider to be evidence, novel predictions.
Yeah, because I was just interested.
Right. So like, if the Bible, to give a more extreme example, if the Old Testament Bible said DNA is a double helix, Donald Trump will be president in year X,
no one would have understood it, right?
I agree. No one would have understood it, but it would have been phenomenal evidence. So
the Bible's not a scientific book, so we're not going to find anything like that in Scripture. That's a category error.
Well,
you're not going to find a lot of theology in a chemistry textbook.
It's not a category error. It's just a description of what evidence would be. So for another more realistic example, in Hinduism, in the Vedas, it says that the age of the earth is 4.3 billion years old. That's a really good prediction, and it was written 6,000 years ago, and it was 95% accurate. It's very, very close. That is a phenomenal piece of evidence.
You're talking about the Yuga and the Kali Yuga, and
yep, all the different ages.
Cyclical time, so it doesn't really work with linear time that I think you and I accept.
Well, that wouldn't make a difference. So like, from the point of the Big Bang, whether the Big Bang was a cyclic universe or a linear universe, the age from the Big Bang till the age of the Earth was 4.3 billion years old. That's exactly correct, or 4.5 billion. So it's really close to correct. So that's a good prediction. They made an accurate prediction.
The Big Bang to
Earth, the age of the Earth.
But you subtract 4.6 from 13.8, right? And you'd have 9.
So it's 0 point of the Big Bang, the amount of time until the Earth existed, 4.3 billion.
I don't think that's quite right, because the Earth's only,
or maybe
4.5 billion years old. Big Bang is
yes, you're right. So it's subtracting
the 13.8, but that's fine.
So you're right. You subtract it from 14.8, but the age of the Earth, just our Earth,
13.8. I hate to be pedantic, but there was a time more than a decade ago where they were starting to say 14, and then they came back to 13.8.
Yeah, I'm generalizing because it just doesn't make a difference.
And it's going to change again, right?
Probably not.
No, but I mean, it'll be refined, that number.
Yeah, you're going to add some decimal places. Yeah, we'll become more accurate. Because even back when it was 14 plus or minus 5 billion. That was the number.
Yeah,
you were still right back then. But the point is that in order to have evidence that your book is correct, it needs to accurately predict something we don't know yet, a novel, testable prediction, and get it right consistently.
That's not the nature of Scripture, with the exception of the prediction of Judgment Day, which is a moot point, because if that happens,
well, actually the Bible makes tons of these. So when we die, we will see heaven. That's a great one. That's a novel, testable prediction. If that happens, that is great evidence of Christianity. So if I die and I meet God,
according to the Bible, no one's in heaven yet.
Well,
Jesus said no one has ascended to heaven. Peter said David has not ascended to heaven.
It's fine. It's fine. It could be infinitely at any time in the future. If I, at some point after my death, I go to the pearly gates and see God, that's phenomenal evidence. That's a novel, testable prediction. Or if the things in Revelation happen as described, that's good prediction. If like a quarter of the Christians magically disappear and their clothes are on the ground, phenomenal evidence. That's great.
Oh, that rapture theology. Oh, I hate that.
But so the point is that in order to say that any hypothesis is true, you need to be able to verify it with a prediction about something we don't know yet. Other than that, any hypothesis is the exact same. It's just an idea we've made up to explain stuff. And to get from that
Yeah,
to show it's independent of just your imagination, you need a novel testable prediction, and the Bible doesn't provide that. Hinduism at least provides one sort of. It's not great. It's kind of bad, but it's at least one sort of.
the Kali Yuga, but I thought it was 4.3 million in Hinduism.
Billion. It's billion.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
But it's
But
also
all this,
wrong because we're only halfway through the cycle, so it's only supposed to be 2. So it's technically wrong, but they got the number right at the end, sort of.
right? Enough predictions. Eventually, some of them will
Exactly.
converge. Yeah, I'm with you there. But the discussion about hypothesis, testability, and so forth, that is scientific language, and it may sound like I'm, it's a cop out, but that's not the kind of language you use when you study literature. I mean, and the Bible's not even a book; it's a library of many different genres, subgenres, dozens of them. It's really not the way it works.
Well, the
So,
question isn't about the way it works. The question is, do you have a way to differentiate that from being just your imagination? So if you don't have a way to differentiate your hypothesis from imagination, you have no evidence. So it doesn't matter if the Bible was intended to be this or not. The question is does it actually provide a reason to believe it's more than imagination? If it provided these, it would. It does not provide these. So as far as I can tell, it does not. And so it's no
well,
different than Harry
I
Potter.
think I think the Lord has our number. I didn't actually start reading the Bible till I was
Get him to
18.
call me. Get him to call me. That would be phenomenal evidence. Can you get him to call me right now? That'd be great.
I couldn't get him to return my calls. How could I get him to return yours? No, but no, the first time I read the Bible, I read the first 9 chapters of Genesis, and I was 9 or 10 years old. I didn't read it again until I was in my teens. But I had this feeling. I got bogged down in those, Methuselah, 969 years. After chapter 10, I was like, huh? What? But I still had the feeling that God has my number. I admit this is quite subjective, but the story of Adam and Eve, and I know you can take it literally or metaphorically, it's not a really big deal, but I thought, okay, that's me. And then they're hiding, and then God says, where are you? As though he didn't know. Where am I? And then Cain kills his brother, and I thought at the time I hit my young brother over the head with hit him over the head and sent him to the hospital. I thought, wow, I'm Cain. He's Abel, I'm Cain. This is speaking to me. I actually got quite uncomfortable. That's a different kind of evidence, Tom. You say, okay, this is challenging my heart. This is addressing who I really am deep down. That's the nature of Scripture. Nature of Scripture is not prediction, hypothesis, testability, data. That's very appropriate when we're doing science. But this is about what it is to be human. This is about our ultimate origin and destiny. It's about who we are, identity, how we relate to others. It's about morality and ethics, meaning and purpose, those existential things. This is what the Bible is. It's not a book of rules. It's a book of relationships, particularly to God and then to one another. That's the Bible. Maybe if you're trying to say, I believe it, if it's more scientific, then that'll never happen because that's not the nature of the Bible any more than you could make me be an Asian female astronaut. I'm the male. I'm American. I'll never be up in space.
Well, so why do you think science doesn't include those things?
Why do I think science doesn't include what things?
All of the personal life building things that you mentioned. Why do you think science doesn't include those in its methodology?
Because it's outside the domain.
Why is it outside of the domain? Why did science specifically take those and say we're not going to use these?
I mentioned origin and destiny and meaning and purpose. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, like meaning, purpose, love, feelings.
Why does
What's
it's
reflection?
not that these things aren't addressed in some of the journals, not the hard sciences, but I mean, social sciences address these things. So I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what you're asking me, Tom.
Why doesn't science use those reflective feelings of, like you mentioned, reading a book and saying it calls to you, and because you can relate it to your life? Why doesn't science use that as a method to distinguish correct things from false things? Why isn't that included in the scientific method anywhere?
Because
They
the
could
scientific method
use
is
it.
because it's grounded in experiment and controlled conditions. The system's way too open. You're talking about meditating on the word, a relationship with God, you in the context of your family. This is very hard to control.
It's because it doesn't work. That's the answer. Like, science includes anything that works. Anything that can accurately differentiate imagination from reality is science. That's it. Doesn't care. It doesn't care what it is. Anything that can do that will be science. And we know some things definitely don't work. They absolutely fail. Personal experience, anecdotal fallacy. We've named them. We've named the things that don't work. Post hoc ergo propter hoc, saying before this, therefore because of this.
Yes.
Because saying that there's a relation, or that you had an experience and that experience was relatable to something in a book, therefore the book is true, post hoc ergo propter hoc. That's why we don't use these
Oh,
methods.
but I don't even think we have to make that conclusion. I mean,
Right.
I understand post hoc ergo propter hoc. When I was reading as a 9-year-old, I wasn't concluding, oh, the book is true. I didn't come to some certain view on inerrancy or inspiration or infallibility. I just thought, ooh, this is kind of spooky. And it was
Sure.
many, many years before I read again. In fact, I think you could come to faith in God and even be a Christian, not believing in the whole Bible.
Sure.
I mean, I don't. You could have
There's lots of
reservations
examples of
about.
that, like Japan, early Japan, people became Christians and didn't have the Bible at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the early Christians had the Old Testament only, and yeah, of course, you may have met some Christians who say there's only really one way to interpret the Scripture. Unless you agree with them, you're just
KJV only.
plain wrong. Oh, the KJV only. Yeah, I have an interesting, fun podcast on that. Right. So, yeah, I don't know all the people you've met, but if you've been doing daily, or even if you're just going to 2 to 3 of these discussions a week, you must have met all kinds of people. And some
I
of
have
them,
like 900 episodes right now.
900 episodes. Wow, that's really interesting. That's interesting.
Age of Abraham.
Okay, in the ancient world, idealized ages and actual ages. That's fading out by the time of Christ. We only talk about your real age. In Egypt, the idealized age was 110, and ancient Israel was 120. Numbers have symbolic meanings. So,
Yep.
when at age 9, I looked at Methuselah and Lamech and these guys, and I thought, oh, maybe it's lunar years if there is such a thing. I tried to figure out, and eventually I just gave up. But there's symbolism here. I don't think in the ancient world anyone thought that someone could live 969 years any more than the Sumerians thought their kings could reign for 42,000 years. If you've seen the Sumerian king list. So the numbers meant something different. Like genealogies had a very different function and meaning than we realize.
There was
Not the modern.
I forget what it's called, where Jewish letters represent numbers.
Oh, well, like in gematria.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, and I mean the it's not just in Hebrew. A lot of languages do that. But it would be interesting to talk about the meaning of Genesis 1 to 11, the primeval narrative. I mean, for a future discussion.
Sure.
One of my books treats that, and my co-author is a philosopher. We have fun with that, and it's not the Sunday school the interpretation of these stories that I think is quite misleading.
Why did they leave out the bears? Like, I think in the kids' picture books that they should absolutely include the bears mauling the kids for making fun of the bald guy. It would just make it so much more entertaining.
Yeah, you can pull out that thing, but I don't think these are kids.
No, I meant in books for children of the Bible, the picture books, the little foldy ones. We should include that in one of the pictures.
Don't make fun of bald people. Yeah, we tend to think these kids were, and it's 42 of them. This is, I mean, you may have seen it a couple of weeks ago. It was a gang of teenage girls beat up and killed and knifed some guy. I don't think this is even just a 7 or 8 teenage girls. This is 42 youths. So I read that more like a street gang, and they're making fun of someone they should have respected. That doesn't happen. We don't see that happening today. But we can say, oh, those poor young people. I'm not so sure about that. We think the Canaanites were just minding their business, doing what Canaanites do: sleep, incest, bestiality, burning their firstborn children in the fire, lying and being corrupt, and living in Israel's land that was promised to them. And we make the Canaanites, we glorify. We just say, well, it was a genocide, which it wasn't at all. Nothing even like that. Or the world doesn't deserve to be judged. Certainly people are fine. And you said about 30, 40 minutes ago, we're getting better and better. We're becoming more and more moral. Moral expression may change. I have a hard time believing that we're that different now, deep down, than they were in Jesus's time or in Abraham's time. That's my opinion.
Gotcha. Well, we have been going for about an hour and a half. We have some questions from the audience, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Cool. This was a question for me from Nothingness. He asks, metaphors are important. Does TJump reject all value in arts and literature? I think that the value in arts and literature is aesthetic, and it doesn't tell us anything about the truth of reality. I don't think we can use arts and literature as a way to determine the facts about the age of the universe or anything. So I don't think that looking to arts and literature is a good way to assess facts about reality. So if you want to comment on that, go ahead.
Yeah, there may be reflection, and sometimes good art and good literature can move us to have more insight into reality. So there may be an indirect connection, but I think what you said is right.
Gotcha. Efont, thank you for the super chat. He asks, can he steel man the best argument against God?
I have to admit, I'm not familiar with that phrase, steel man. What is that?
Oh, so like a straw man is when you make a representation of an argument that's weaker than it is. A steel man is the opposite, where you try to make the strongest possible interpretation, like what I did with the Gospels. If I said they were living today, had eyewitness testimony, there was no witnesses in the, so you just make it as strong as possible.
Super chat is asking you.
Oh no, he's asking you, can you steel man the best argument against God?
I think many people, if they're honest, would say the problem of suffering is a difficult one emotionally. If there's a God, why cancer? Why, if the Bible's true, why would only the minority of people ultimately be with God? Why would the rest be destroyed? Why did my sister die when she was only 20 years old? That's actually my sister. She had diabetes. These things can really put us in a tailspin. And I think there are good answers, but emotionally, we process these things emotionally more than intellectually. So I'm not saying that because there's suffering in the world, I don't think there's a God. But I think what people find most weighty is, it's pain that happens on God's watch, things that God allows. So I don't know if I'm answering that question.
Yep. Because he was just asking, can you represent the best argument?
It would be something like that. Wow, the questions are coming really fast here.
Well, those are all comments. So there's tons of those. There's only specifically the ones that are tagging me are the questions. And so there's a...
Okay, you take another one.
Sure. Keith Koster asks, ask him how he would know what is metaphor versus what's literal in the Bible.
First, to read the whole Bible. Most people who claim to be Christians have never read the whole Bible. I mean, to read it multiple times, so we're really familiar with it. Don't read just the Bible, read other kinds of literature, and then you become familiar with the different genres. And I think it takes a little bit of training, but it's not hard. I mean, every language, every culture has metaphor, but what we may take something literally that we shouldn't. We just need some training. I mean, if there's a specific example, I could clarify, but I'm saying read all of Scripture, read other books, and you can see. Students of literature normally understand what's a metaphor. I mean, there's always a possibility someone could misunderstand, but For you, the sun will go down at noon. Okay, you see in the prophets. Well, the sun's not going down, but you're going to be in darkness. We're not talking about a solar phenomenon. We're talking about this is the language of blessing and cursing, light and dark. And if you read all the scripture, you can make those connections.
Jesus is a door.
Yeah, you go through him. He's bread. He's light. He's a shepherd, and God is a rock.
There's a serious problem of trying to establish, because there's some obvious ones like that, like Jesus is a door. I don't think they literally mean he has a handle and you open it. But there are some points in the Bible where it's hard to distinguish, is this a literal or figurative thing, and to try to figure that out is a difficult process that I don't know if there is really an objective answer on. It's my position.
Is there an example that comes to your mind, Tom?
Not off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look at them, because there's a whole list of them, things that could be interpreted literally that seem ridiculous. Talking snake, talking donkey, those are probably the big two. Did the donkey literally talk, or is this a metaphor?
I mean, the snake is a common in
serpent.
Ancient creation stories. You have a loss of immortality somehow connected to a serpent. Do you have to take that as a literal talking snake? I mean, I hope not, but if someone does...
Well, the question is did the authors intend it to be literal, or did they intend it to be metaphorical? And the question is
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So in the primeval narrative, which I think is a patchwork, it's a retelling of a number of stories that were familiar in the ancient world. I think people would recognize, what would strike them would be how different this is. Like, where are the other gods? There's only one God. God creates people when there's honor and dignity, not to be their slaves, not to be the slaves of the gods, but to be trusted, to bear God's image. I think people would notice those things. A talking donkey, now that's in the book of Numbers. I think you take that one either way, but talking snake, So, as a younger person, I thought, I guess I was insecure. I want everyone, I hated disagreement. I want everyone to have the same interpretation I do. I'm a little bit more broad right now. But this question of metaphor is that's a great question.
For sure.
So we need an interpreter. Nicholas says, we need training in interpretation. I used to think that the Bible, I don't know where I heard this, God's his own interpreter. The Bible, you don't need to interpret it, you just need to obey it, as though we're so objective that you just need to do what it says. And well, the question is, what does it say? So interpretation takes work, and it's much more convenient just to act like you don't need to interpret it. Just let someone else tell you what it means. But I think that's lazy.
Joking Atheist, thank you for the super chat. He says, 70s are for the sofa debate. Thanks to the host and the guest. Both present themselves as gentlemen. Appreciate the compliment.
I'm glad they think we're both gentlemen. Thank you.
I'm definitely not. I don't know about you. It's like, ouch. I'm a scoundrel.
You mean you're not normally like this?
Yes, I want to be a scoundrel. I don't want to be a gentleman. That's an insult. Insult to my honor. Pirate. No. Gentleman stuff.
How we interact is important.
For sure.
Harry says again, he wants slaves. Well, okay. It's still, what is it, like 4 to 5 million people being trafficked today?
Yes, there's still a huge amount of slavery.
But I know you're just kidding there.
Yeah, he's trolling. Yes, free will is important, but why didn't God make Eve smart enough not to be fooled by the serpent? From Harry Nick, thank you for the 5 GDP.
Yeah, it's not really about the serpent. It's about doing what she knew was right. So the serpent comes along and he kind of twists the command. Did God really say you shouldn't eat from any tree in the garden? Actually, there's only one forbidden. And he kind of pulls her in. He tells these half-truths. And so you could say deceived by the serpent, the evil one. You could say she's deceived by herself. It's the same thing. It underscores our amazing ability to rationalize and to twist. And it's one reason I think we're no different today. It's the same. Yeah.
Gotcha. Mr. Monster, thank you for the super chat. Have you heard of ontological mathematics and how people try to prove the existence of a soul through Pythagorean mathematics? Seems wild.
Have you heard of ontological mathematics? Oh, so numbers are not just real, but they're real in more of a Platonic sense?
Yep, that's ontological mathematics says that
Okay.
mathematical
Pythagorean
objects
mathematics.
exist.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how you would. It's hard enough just to define what a soul is, let alone prove its existence. So I'm with you, Super Chat. It does seem wild. It's beyond me.
All right, Charles and Solo, thank you for the super chat. What part of the Bible is real, descriptive of reality, and which part is metaphor, imaginary? Are the two mixed together? In what ratio?
Well, I think the whole Bible is giving us a true picture of reality, even when there is metaphor. But if you're asking about, say, what's poetic, probably 30% or more of the Bible is poetic. And I don't mean poetic in my opinion. I mean in the opinion of Hebrew scholars. I mean, my Hebrew's not that good, but it actually is poetry. I'm not saying, oh, that you just mean that poetically. No, it's actually in poetry. A lot of the prophets are poetry, the Psalms, of course. And poetry is very common. So at least 30%, maybe more, maybe a third, maybe a little bit more. But when you say real and descriptive reality, it's a book of relationships. It's not meant to tell us about the new world or what is DNA, but about who we are, which is in relation to a God, human dignity, human obligation, love for the deity, love for one another. That's real. It's a moral world. There's accountability. Ultimately, there's a day of judgment, and it will be fair. No doubt, it will be fair. That's what I mean by descriptive reality. Jesus, if you read the Gospels, you read a lot of things about Jesus that I think are pretty straightforward. On the other hand, he tells a lot of parables, which may have some verisimilitude, though most of them have some zany, fantastical element. A guy who owes 25 times the national debt of France, to someone else, and God he forgives him his debt. There's always something that is really wild. But even parables are true in that they convey truth. But you would be severely destroying a parable if you insisted that all the details are literally true. That's just not the way it works. That's all I can say for now.
Gotcha. Kiyam Inc. asks, how would you react, go forth if irrefutable evidence of the Bible being untrue surfaced in your lifetime?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think what that would look like. I mean, if it turned out
Jesus's
that
bones.
Oh, well, that would be a real problem. Yeah, if the, and of course, you may remember about 15, 20 years ago, someone found a tomb of, there was a Jesus and a Joseph and a Mary, but these are like some of the most common names in the first century. If you go to the Israel Museum, there in Jerusalem, there is a ossuary, and you'll find those names, but they're so common it doesn't really mean anything. But yeah, if you found Jesus's bones, that would be very strong evidence against the resurrection, and that would be then to continue to play at being a Christian when you knew that would be false and utterly pitiful. And that's what the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:17, 1 Corinthians 15:19. So bones. Thank you, Tom, for that suggestion.
Well, yes, the question is, how would you react, to go forth if you found this evidence?
Oh, feel? Well, I don't know. I'd probably be numb at first, and hopefully I would do the right thing. But having experienced Jesus, having studied all the other major religions and always thinking about these things, you'd be very surprised if something, I mean, I don't even know what would come up. Yeah, if it was Jesus' bones, that would be a big problem. But what else would it be? What else could just throw me off?
We could die and meet Vishnu. That would be
yeah, but that's too. Oh, you die and meet Vishnu. Yeah, the sustainer. Well, I'd rather meet Vishnu than Kali or Durga.
Yep, I'm going for Thor. I want I want Thor. Thor. I want the battle thing after
Oh, people
Valhalla. We
want
die in
Thor
battle.
and Odin and Loki but these Nordic gods and the Vikings, all these series, they're so interesting. But these gods, these pantheons are no different than the Greco-Roman gods or the gods in Hinduism. They they're just badly behaved mortals. It's what we would do if we had that kind of power. We know that's true because there are lots of dictators right now acting just those.
I wonder if I would say the same thing about Christianity. Big Sky Daddy who drowns people because he doesn't like them, sends bears to kill people. Yeah, seems very human in very many ways.
Going back to the flood story, so in Gilgamesh epic, the gods miscalculate, so they create the humans to do their work for them as slaves, and then the humans are noisy and the gods can't sleep, so they send a flood to destroy them, and then the waters are rising, and the firmament, which of course is a hemispherical dome. Anyway, the water's rising up, and the gods are pressed against the firmament. They're afraid they're going to drown. I mean, that's just totally ridiculous. Then you read the Genesis 7, 8, 9, and it's not that that's more reasonable, but you can see the change. The flood is not for some arbitrary, okay, we can't sleep well, so we're going to drown these people.
It seems pretty arbitrary, a little
it's
bit.
because of the sin of violence. Yeah, maybe arbitrary is not the right word there, but it does seem a bit extreme to drown someone who's disturbing your sleep.
Have you heard of the parody of the atheist comedy parody of Christianity, where it's God sacrificed himself to himself for his own mistake because he sent a talking snake to convince a rib woman to eat from a magical tree, and so he had to send a cosmic zombie Jew to be sacrificed, and we eat of his flesh and drink of his blood.
Wow, that sounds crazy.
It does, doesn't
And
it?
it's funny. Though it's a distortion.
But from the atheist perspective, it's equally as rational as the Christian faith, or it seems equally as rational as the Christian faith, which is equally as seems crazy as all the other religions from our perspective.
But the atheist isn't really he's not making a positive case for something, right? I mean, if someone's proclaiming the message of scripture, he is.
All right, I was just comparing like your story of the Gilgamesh where the gods were fearing being drowned and how silly that sounds. It sounds equally as silly from the atheist perspective as the other religions, including Christianity. That was the only point there. Not obviously, I don't think any of them are true, but the point is just the level of the story's strangeness of the way it sounds. They both sound really strange.
Well, and since you've read the New Testament, that the crucifixion was a scandal to the Jews. It was foolishness to the Greeks. Why would God become a man and be willing to die? I mean, be willing to sell himself into the hands of the evil one. People just couldn't process that, and the Jews were looking for a valiant,
hero savior to conquer
the
Romans.
Kick out right, and that's not at all what he was. Well, there was that side. He would be the judge, but that's delayed. That's part 2. That's yet to come. And for the Greeks, it just made no sense at all. So maybe that's you and many skeptics who are watching our interaction today. So I'm not totally surprised, but there's a beauty and a power, and I hope maybe you'll go back and look at those scriptures again.
I think. I mean, I kind of think they're boring. I think Harry Potter is much more beautiful and powerful, but it's just my opinion.
Well, you're reading some of the same themes in Harry Potter, or how about the Narnia stories?
Yes, C.S.
Harry
Lewis
Potter has
directly.
that death and resurrection theme running through, I think, all the books.
Yep.
So that's a good step, moving us towards the message of Scripture, and I think C.S. Lewis would have said that.
Sure.
So,
next question. Oh no, that's the one I wanted. Goblin Lord X, TJump, which half truths from what I recall God confirmed all statements the serpent we said were correct later in the story? So I think he's saying that the serpent was the one telling the truth in the story because God confirmed everything the serpent said.
No, the serpent says, I don't have it in front of me, but did God really say you can't touch any tree of the garden? And then
You will
No,
surely die. And he
and
says,
you will
you will
surely
not die. You will know something or gain knowledge.
right. And it seems to be a spiritual death that's being talked about there, not a
And so
physical death.
the serpent didn't lie. Everything he said was true to Eve when he told her about the stuff. I think that's the point, is that the serpent was telling the truth.
No, I
So he
think he
wasn't
was
manipulating Eve. He was telling her the
no,
truth.
no, he was telling half truth.
But then doesn't that
No,
also mean God was telling half truths as well?
why would God be telling half truths?
Well, because they were both telling the truth about what was going to happen after she ate the apple, but they were describing it in different ways or different aspects of it. They were both sides of the same coin. But what the serpent said was true. You're not going to actually perish right here, right now. So what that aspect of what you could interpret God's statements to mean is false. And so he was telling the truth as well as God was, because he was interpreting it a different way. And so both were telling the truth, describing the consequences of the action from a
Well,
different
yeah, he was
perspective.
telling a little bit of truth. When you open it, when you eat it, your eyes will be open, and eat it. It's not like it's a long conversation. It's, did God actually say you shall not eat any tree of the garden? And then, you will not surely die. God knows when you eat it, you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. That's the whole conversation. I mean, that's all in that story
Yeah,
the serpent says. So half true.
gotcha. Lloyd G asks, thank you for the super chat. How did Eve know right from wrong before eating the knowledge of the good and evil? Before eating the
It's all
apple?
these questions. I mean, look, we're talking about people. Adam is the masculine form of the word for dirt. Adama. Hawa, Eve, is the mother of all the living, and you're approaching her as an historical person, which I guess you could do, but it's kind of hard to analyze this. How would someone know right from wrong before? Oh, well, actually, no, that question does make a lot of sense. There's enough responsibility, culpability that she doesn't have a leg to stand on. And anyway, she says, yeah, she was told that they could eat the fruit of any tree except the one in the midst of the garden. So she knew at least that right from wrong. The other part may have been, I don't know, it could have been innate. I mean, the Bible simply doesn't say. It's just such a little story. But if you're saying, would humans be really morally accountable before eating that
Yeah.
fruit?
Yeah. So, like, how can you blame Eve for eating the fruit if she didn't have the knowledge of good and evil, because she couldn't be culpable? You have to be culpable. You already have to have some kind of responsibility level. And if the
Yeah,
apple is what gives that responsibility level, then she
because
couldn't be culpable.
I think the answer is that the knowledge here is not just intellectual knowledge. Okay, here's a list of right and wrong behaviors. This is an experiential knowledge, to actually experience evil in your life.
But wouldn't that mean she didn't experience that before eating the apple, and so she wouldn't be culpable?
I'm not sure you have to do bad things in order to know what's right and wrong. Of course, you know I would say the same thing about Jesus. Hebrews 5 says he learned obedience through what he suffered. That doesn't mean he was necessarily disobedient. But to experience evil by entering into the world of evil is quite different from knowing better. And I'm sure you've done things, Tom, you wish you hadn't done. It's not always, well, I didn't know it was wrong. It's not always we figured out it's wrong because of the consequences. Sometimes we know what we're doing.
I think it's more like, we wouldn't blame a baby for flipping a switch and accidentally killing someone because they don't have the cognitive capacity to have
Fair
responsibility.
enough, but that's certainly not the way that this couple are presented in Genesis 3. They're not presented as naive or I mean, you
Well, I
could
think
read
that's
it that
what the
way.
question is implying, is like, if before eating the apple, it seems like she would qualify as something like a baby because she didn't already have the knowledge of good and evil. And so she wouldn't be able to differentiate, was this right to do or was this wrong to do? And so
No,
there must
I
be.
would say she has some knowledge of good and evil, but not the experiential knowledge of good and evil.
Gotcha. All right. Question from Michael Castro. Could it be that Jesus's prediction was written after the temple was destroyed? So his prediction of the temple could be added
Yes.
in after.
Yeah, so that's the prediction in Matthew 24. Mark 13, Luke 21. Yeah, in fact, it probably was written after. Well, maybe not for Mark, but I think even most conservative scholars put Matthew in the 70s, temple destroyed in 70, Luke maybe in the 80s, John in the 90s, or maybe in the 40s. On the other hand, I mean, so if it's written after, it doesn't mean that he didn't speak of the destruction of the temple, because it could have been better. I mean, if it was written, if he didn't say those things, if they're just attributing things to Jesus, he might have said something about the temple being burnt. I mean, this is one of the, if you look at Josephus's description, I mean, this fire just burned and burned, but that's never mentioned. There are details that are not mentioned. Vespasian and then Titus enslaving everyone, crucifying people. There are a lot of details that they could have thrown in, to make it seem truer, but that's not done. So, not mentioning.
Oh, I get what you're saying now. You're saying that if it was added later, they could have made it more specific to make it more compelling, but they didn't.
There's an example like in this, we talk about the resurrection. So Jesus's tomb, there's a seal and there's a guard. But if you look in Matthew, it looks like the guard is posted on Saturday, not Friday when he's killed. So if they're just making stuff up, why wouldn't you say, oh yeah, let's put the guard, if you're just making it up, you'd have the guard there from the beginning. So it seems more likely they're not just making stuff up, because they could have made it up a lot better if that's all they're doing. Maybe I'm reading too much into there, but that's the way I see it.
That was not hair. Asks, what predictions from Christianity for the next 100 years? What predictions are there from Christianity for the next 100 years?
There aren't any. I mean, just that the wages of sin is death. If we do what's wrong, it's going to mess us up. It'll mess up our relationships. It alienates us from God. It even alienates us from ourselves. But those aren't really predictions. That's more a description of reality. It's that alienation. When we, in a moral universe, when we do what's wrong, we're at odds with ourselves. We're not just at odds with God. And it hurts our relationships with others, particularly those we care about. And I think probably we've all experienced that. So not predictions. I mean, you'll find people predicting the end of the world every year. But
yep.
Jesus and Paul said, don't do that. Yeah.
All right. Nadimus asks, has Douglas read Jewish literature dated prior to the New Testament, and what does he think of the varying messianic views that aren't just military kings?
Yeah, I think I've read a lot of the literature. I mean, during the COVID years, I finished all the Dead Sea Scrolls, the non-biblical Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's a lot of material. There are different views. So but basically it's the warrior, it's the teacher or teacher warrior. There's the Lamb of God. Can I just simplify it for time? Genesis 49 gives an image that was interpreted by the Jews to be messianic, of the lion of the tribe of Judah. He's a lion, like Aslan in Narnia. The lamb that was slain, Isaiah 53. He's a lion and a lamb. And in Revelation 5, you see that it's the same being. And so some people gravitate towards the lamb. Jesus, he wouldn't hurt a fly, and poor Jesus, sacrificial. And then others, he'll be full of vengeance and he'll declare justice. And boy, you better not be on his wrong side. He's the lion. He's both. It's not one or the other. But for the most part, they were expecting the militant figure. But there's a targum, there's an explanation of Isaiah 53 in Aramaic that takes this suffering servant, this lamb, as the Messiah, dying for people's sins. So you'll even find what is the Christian view there. And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, like 4Q 521, from Cave 4, where the plurality of the scrolls were found, it's a description of the Messiah who raises the dead, who heals the sick, he does all kinds of things, helps the crooked to stand up straight, liberates captives. It's the language in Isaiah, but which is quoted in Matthew among other places, but it's actually it jibes with what you see in 4Q 521, which is written well before the time of Jesus. I've probably said too much, but
Sounds good to me. I have not heard much about that, so I'm happy to
yeah, there were
make that
different expectations, and but there was a tremendous cognitive dissonance. The things Jesus said and the things he did, like what you can, I mean, he's even rebuked by Peter. You can't suffer, you can't die. Yeah, Matthew 16.
Gotcha. Doc Player and whatnot, thank you for the super chat. Scholars date Mark to after 70 because the little apocalypse describes the temple's destruction. It is a plea asking Jews to flee and become pacifists.
Well, most scholars date Mark to I think 65 is the typical date. Most scholars, even though you've got the mini apocalypse, they still put it in the year in the 60s. But as far as the Jews fleeing and becoming pacifists, I don't know if the pacifist part is right. I mean, I'm a pacifist, but he's telling those who believe the oracle to get out of town. And Josephus says they did, and they fled to Pella across the Jordan in what is modern Jordan. Pacifists, not quite, because the 70 AD this was virtually the end of the what's called the Jewish War. They're fighting with Rome. Started as independence movement in Galilee up north in 66, but in 132 they tried again. There's another from 132 to 15 under Bar Kosiva or Bar Kokhba. And they're certainly not pacifists there. It was the Christians who were pacifists who said we don't kill our enemies. The Jews tried again another war in the 130s. There's even a rebellion. I think it was in 112 or so in Egypt. So I take a little bit of exception to the question, though it is a very interesting one.
I think there's a hypothesis that like there's this model that Jesus was invented by the Tertullians because they wanted to make a model of Judaism that was pacifistic to make the Jews to pacify them or something along those lines. And so there's an interpretation that there were this certain groups of Jews who wanted to be more pacifistic and not fight with Rome, and that inspired some of the writings that are pro-Roman in the New Testament.
Well, sometimes people say that Luke wrote 1/4 of the New Testament, Luke and Acts, which is 1/4. In some ways portrays the Romans in a slightly more positive light, but yeah, I'm not sure I would go that far.
Because there's the one quote where like there is a Roman soldier who is better than all the Jews, and that to give unto Caesar what is Caesar's.
The centurion he's asking for a miracle, and Jesus says, Jesus, you don't need to come, just say the word, and I know it'll be done. And he says that's the kind of faith I don't even see in Israel. But not sure that's really pro-Roman. So in the Gospel of Mark, I think the best evidence shows the first words are the beginning of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And then you have the demons confessing he's Son of God, and you've got others. And finally, in Mark 15, a centurion, this is a different centurion, who had the crucifixion detail, he says, surely this was the Son of God. To say that's pro-Roman would be crazy, because Son of God is a title for the Kaiser, for the Caesar. In that time, it would be Tiberius, who died in 37 AD. But to say that Jesus is the Son of God, and Savior and Redeemer, and these are words that were applied to first century Roman emperors. So Christians were good citizens in one way, but bad in another, because they wouldn't participate in the idolatry of certain civic events, and they would not sacrifice to Caesar or to the genius of Caesar. So you could say they're anti-Roman in a way.
Gotcha.
Just Son of God itself that's Caesar's, that's his phrase, and they're saying no, that's Jesus. He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So that's politically laden language.
Gotcha. Lloyd G asks, please ask Douglas, what makes the Bible more true than the Quran? They are both religious books with billions of followers. What gives Christianity's Bible credibility?
Well, that's a good question, and it's it's almost 1 in 4 human beings who are Muslims. I take that very seriously. Like the master's degree students I teach, I have them read the Quran and the Hadith, I've read the Quran through 4 times in 4 different translations. I continue to study. I have debates with Muslims.
Oh, can you read it in Arabic?
No. And
Damn.
if that was my thing, of course, technically it's not a Quran if it's not in Arabic.
Right.
And it's not a Quran if there's even one small change.
I was going to
But
say, because I was going to invite you on to have a conversation with some of my Muslim friends. You're like, you must be able to read it in Arabic. And I'm just like, there's problems in Arabic and need an Arabic scholar to come on and just debate that with them.
yeah, I don't know if yeah, maybe I know someone who could do that. But if they want to read the New Testament in Greek, I do that. The Greek's good. But anyway, what makes it true? Of course, the Quran borrows a lot from the Bible, the Old and New Testament, and there's a lot of truth in the Quran. But I would say, what my answer may be interesting to you, to Lloyd. Read the Quran. So it's 80% the length of the New Testament. It's not that hard. Read the whole Quran. Read the Bible. Read especially the New Testament, and see what you think. I know it sounds crazy. Most Muslims I've met have never read the Quran. All the prayers come from the Quran in Arabic, but most of them have never read the whole thing. I've met hardly anyone. And most Christians have never read the Bible. But I think if you actually read them, and I would also say read the Hadith, because these are accepted by virtually all Muslim scholars worldwide, particularly the Hadith of Bukhari, which I've read completely, all 9 volumes. And you'll see who Muhammad is. Is he the ideal human? And then look at Jesus and compare. And I'll just leave it at that, if I may.
Masked Bandit asked, have the writers of the New Testament been shown to have actually existed outside of the biblical sources?
The writers of the New Testament, of course, it's a little tricky because the Gospels are all anonymous, right? As is 2nd and 3rd John. But if we went with the traditional figures, had they been known to exist outside of biblical sources? John, yes, because John taught Polycarp, and we have something from him in the 2nd century. And Polycarp taught Irenaeus, and we have things from Irenaeus from late 2nd century and early 3rd century. So for him, yeah, there's a chain that goes back. If we're looking for that existed outside of biblical sources, Jesus is, as you may know, mentioned in 42 sources. If you go up to the mid to late 2nd century, 9 of those are in the Bible, 33 are secular sources outside. And a fun comparison is look at Tiberius Caesar, who was the emperor from 14 to 37. He's also mentioned in a number of sources, but nowhere near as many as Jesus. I'm not counting the inscriptions in stone. He's everywhere. But if you don't, I'm talking about written, like in books and things. Jesus actually is mentioned in many, many. There are multiple sources within the Bible and outside the Bible. But other writers, it's a little, yeah, I mean, you can go into the cave in Ephesus, you'll see a picture of Paul, but that's a little bit late. I think it's based on the Acts of Paul, 160 AD. But no, there aren't many. But so I'm not sure what this establishes. But of course, our best knowledge of Jesus is going to be the New Testament. Why would it be otherwise?
Gotcha. Yeah. Taylor Watson asks, if people made all this up, wouldn't these problems be the exact evidence we would expect to see? They could not imagine better.
How do you take that, Tom? What does that mean? Which problem?
I think he's saying that if the Bible was a human document, we would expect to see all of these problems because it's a human document. Because we see all these problems, therefore it's likely a human document.
But what problems?
Problems of interpretation, the problems of the historicity, the problems of the contradictions, like all of the things that atheists bring up seem to be problems that would exist in human documents that if it was really a godly document, we wouldn't be able to bring up these kinds of criticisms.
I'm sure that knowing human nature, criticisms would be found or problems would be invented, even if there weren't any.
But I don't think I would agree there, because if I take Godel Bach or something, I can't make the same kind of criticisms of Godel Bach that I do of the Bible. It's a logic textbook.
Okay, so there's a parallel. Just hear me out here. You've got, if the Bible is the Word of God, we also have Jesus being presented as the Word of God in the Gospel of John. Oh, and by the way, in the Quran too, for that matter. Jesus in the incarnation became human, earthy. He sweated, not just sweat. I mean, he had to go to the toilet. He probably was sick sometimes. He probably was stressed sometimes. Even if he never sinned, he went through a full human experience. The Bible itself also is written. It's God's communication coming down to our level. It's in human languages, using human metaphors, it's set in human culture in certain empires, and there are. It's a very human document and divine at the same time. Just as Christians believe Jesus is very human, but also divine. So there are two aspects. I don't know, that may help a little bit there. So some things that we consider problems are just that it's a human book. The Bible exists in many partial and complete manuscripts, but there are lots of copying errors. But it doesn't change the essential message. But that's the way it is. In contrast, the Quran, yes, there were copying errors, although few would admit it. But it's said that if it's not really the Quran unless it's perfect and perfectly preserved. The Christian message is so robust, even if the Bible wasn't completely accurately copied, the message is still there. It's not lost. So I don't see these being the big problems that others do. I feel like I'm taking too much time to explain, Tom. You're being very patient with me.
Oh, no, it's totally fine. Take as much time as you need. The questions are for you, so giving you as much time is the best thing to do. Let's see, we have been going for about 2 hours and 20 minutes. So really appreciate your time. It was a great conversation. Do you want to give any links or references where people can find out more about your work?
Oh, well, yeah, I've got a website. It's douglasjacoby.com. Here in Britain, they pronounce it Jacoby, but it's the same word. So just it's all one word.com, and lots of stuff there. You may join me on one of my tours. I lead tours to the Mediterranean world, like Turkey, or Greece, Italy.
I would love to. I would love to do a live debate with you sometime. That would be awesome.
Face to face. So where are you right now? Where is your home?
Minneapolis, Minnesota.
You're in Minneapolis itself.
Yep. But I do a lot of traveling. So I was just on a trip to Mexico as a speaker for Black Non-Believers. We did a cruise to Belize. That was pretty cool. So I do travel a lot. Go to Texas pretty often. That's where a lot of conferences are.
We could I just got back from Moldova a few days ago. I'll be in Israel in a few weeks. So we both do a lot of international travel, and our paths could cross there, or we could meet in Minneapolis. In the COVID years, I was doing a debate in Milwaukee, and we had the auditorium for like 900 people plus, and then it got canceled, but I still flew out, and we had the camera guy. We filmed it. It went well. I'd love to come see you, or you can come to Scotland.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Next time you're in the UK, it's not even an hour flight from London.
For sure.
Well, I'll say goodnight to you. The sun actually set quite a while. Yeah, the sun set quite a while ago. It's very dark here. So I'm going to say goodnight.
Absolutely. Thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
Hope
Thank
you
you.
have a wonderful
And
rest
thanks
of
to
your day.
all those who weighed in and commented and asked questions. And
absolutely. All right. Okay. Talk to you later.